Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. And it was in a thunderstorm.
Yes. And under all the stars.
That's right.
We had the biggest sky in the world.
That's right. Big skies here in Texas. So we had an interview today with David Mathisen, who is going to be with us at Contact at the Cabin 2020 on April. So it was a fantastic interview. That's coming up. And the Watcher was there for the interview, but he is not here now while we're recording this intro.
So, oh, yeah, I hung up on him.
Yeah.
Whoops. What? Why don't I just get him on?
It's all right. I voxed him. I think he's going to bed. So let's just start out with space weather news from spaceweather.com. Perseid meteor update. The Earth is exiting the debris zone of the comet Swift-Tuttle, source of the annual Perseid meteor shower. Despite bright moonlight, observers witnessed many Perseid fireballs when the shower peaked on August 12th and 13th. Amateur radio operators also detected unusual ionization of the Earth's upper atmosphere. Perseid activity will continue at sharply diminishing levels for the next few nights. Also, explosion interrupts solar minimum. Yesterday, August 13th, a completely unexpected explosion occurred on the spotless sun. Coronagraphs orbiting on board the orbiting Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, or SOHO, recorded a cloud of debris billowing away from the blast site. The slow-moving cloud is not headed for Earth. It will sail wide of our planet and not cause a geomagnetic storm. If the blast site had been facing Earth, the story might be different. Coils of strong magnetism evident in the structure of the cloud could cause strong auroras and other effects if they had made contact with Earth's magnetosphere. Explosions like this can happen at any time, even during solar minimum, when magnetic fields in the sun's atmosphere occasionally become unstable and reorganize themselves. No sunspots required. Good thing, because the sun has been without spots for 7 straight days and altogether more than 150 days so far in 2019. Solar minimum continues with chance of interruptions.
Could happen any moment.
That's right. Solar wind speed is 451.3 kilometers per second, and the density is 2.2 protons per cubic centimeter.
Yeah, it was terrible out there.
Yeah, it's been pretty brutal here in South Texas.
Yep.
So, all right, let's see what else I got here. I got some email. I got some comments, I think. Do I have comments?
It's the worst when there's an explosion on the sun and there's no wind.
Yeah.
But at least the density was down. If the density was high, it would have just felt like real muggy.
Yeah. I love how we're trying to correlate how it feels down here. Oh, yeah, those proton density was low. All right, so here's one review from iTunes Reviews. Wicked, awesome, funny. This is from Roddy Gerardfrey from the USA. These guys are great. Their back and forth banter is hilarious, and they cover a wide range of interesting and fascinating topics that spam the length and breadth of this wild, weird, and woolly world we live in. Their Ophidian observations are both humorous, thought-provoking, and their lively conversation is peppered with descriptive serpent euphemisms. So
seriously.
Serious. So listen, laugh, and learn, or just sit back and enjoy the oral journey. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, it's a great review there.
We got a 1-star review because of the laughing.
We did.
That guy needs an attitude adjustment.
This is true. Okay, I do have some emails to read here. Let's see. Let me pull these up. Okay, here's one from Joe Dunn. Dudes, started listening to you guys after the Randall Carlson Contact at the Cabin pre-meetings. Love your subjects and love your insight, so I went back to start the whole catalog. I listen on Stitcher and only see back to episode 25, the same with iTunes. Have the pyramid-building overlords of the present day suppressed you, or am I just a butt flap? Where are the early episodes? And also, could the ancients have had a tool that was like our current pressure washers that acted on solid stone like my Ryobi acts on dirt, Joe? Yeah. So I said, yes, Joe, it was called the Shamir. And the pressure washer analogy is apt. And I also, for anybody else that has this question about where are the earliest episodes, FeedBurner has a feed size limit, so there will only be 100 objects in the feed at any given time. So each time we post a new episode, one episode at the earliest gets shoved out. So to find those archive shows, they're on our website, brothersoftheserpent.com, or you can go to the YouTube channel where History Shift has posted all of them. So
thanks, History Shift.
Yep. Let's see what else we got here. Chase, our good old buddy Chase, who is also at Contact Cabin 2019. He says, nothing like some good old shit builders. I've been listening to the third segment of episode 104, and y'all have been talking about shipbuilding. Not sure why, but I can't hear the P when you guys say ship. Consequently, it makes it sound like y'all are talking in a completely serious manner about ancient cultures of shipbuilders. Haha. They've been building shit for hundreds of years and building hundreds of shits. It is 5:30 a.m. and my eyes are watering from laughing so hard. Had to tell you because it's friggin' hilarious, and now you're going to hear it every time you say shit. I am an adult. Fontini. That's a great one from our buddy Chase there. From the Grand Watcher about number 108. On August 5th, Green Bay had a sudden intense rainstorm. That sunset, the entire western sky was bright orange. Having grown up in this area, it was a complete surprise. It was the first time it was ever seen in my 69 years. That would have been sufficient, yet when one looked to the eastern sky, there was an orange-tinted rainbow. Can you explain that to me?
An orange-tinted rainbow. I'll get back to you on that one,
Grand Watcher. And number 2, wow, just freaking wow. What an episode. He loved the Randall Carlson stuff. Yeah.
Cool. You have great penmanship.
Yeah. We'd love to hear from the Grand Watcher. Let's see. All right, this is a good one. From Gary. Greetings, Serpent Bros from the Big Rock Stone Mountain in Georgia. I watched episode 001 of Cosmographia with Randall Carlson, Bradley, and Mike last night. Great show. I look forward to seeing it where it all ends up, meaning the website and podcast feeds you guys are creating for all of the content. I also pulled y'all's podcast into my Overcast playlist and started listening. Figured I'd start with the most recent and go back as time permits. I've listened to the 3 most recent and really enjoyed the shows. Keep up the good work and know you have a new dedicated follower, Gary, old fart, high-tech redneck, and Jeep enthusiast.
Sup, Gary?
Sup, Gary? Thank you, man. Thank you so much for listening.
The beginning of a great friendship.
That's great. Also from Avery. Good old Avery. We also met at Contact the Cabin. This is called Everything. Hey guys, I've been meaning to email you after like the last 6 shows, but life just keeps happening. But here I am to say that they have all been completely awesome. I really enjoyed your discussions on human origins and genetics. It's so crazy to think that we once lived in a world where there was at least 4 different kinds of hominid that all survived together. I was curious if you guys had looked into the work of Bruce Fenton. He has a couple of very interesting books on the subject. Yeah, I follow him on Twitter, and I'm trying to get him on the show, so hopefully that'll happen. I also thought the interview with Martin Sweatman was fantastic. It's gratifying to see a member of the scientific community really delving into all this information, supporting evidence of a lost civilization. And as a fan of all things Younger Dryas, I'll definitely be getting his book sometime soon. And of course, your Chris Cottrell interview was super fascinating as well. Those Carolina Bays are really another big part of this whole planetary mystery we have in front of us. It was also really fun to hear, let's see, here's something up on your, I don't know how this is written weird, up on your show, because it actually, I actually found Dabbler's Den on YouTube about 6 months ago, but above all, I am so excited about the Cosmography podcast. I have been waiting for Randall's Gnosis podcast since he announced it over a year ago, but to have something that focuses on the geology as opposed to the esoteric is what I'm really after. I am so grateful that you guys actually pinned him down and to help make it happen. So my hat goes off to you. The work you guys are doing is fantastic, and you truly are an inspiration, Avery.
Wow, man. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun to hang out with you at CAC 19.
Yeah. Hopefully you're going to CAC 2020, buddy.
Yeah, hopefully you're going to be there. And if not, we're going to be planning plenty of other trips, some with Randall too. So hopefully we'll see you soon, buddy. Let's see, what else have I got here? Okay, this one I'm not really sure. This guy might have been, but it's a good one anyway. From Dave 8 Pies. Damn fine podcast. The champagne of podcasts. Hits the sweet spot between giddy and sublime. Holding the line of defense against the dark art of skirp tartary. Buckaroo Banzai would be proud. Cordial greetings from Hereford, UK. P.S. have you read? Thanks, Dave. We appreciate it, buddy.
Love it.
And then there was a follow-up email with a picture. I think it's...
okay. Have you read?
Have you read? And then
books.
he forgot to send the thing, and so he sends me the... it's called The Philosopher's Secret Fire, A History of the Imagination.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Nope. Haven't read.
P.S.
Have not read.
P.S. Have you read? End of email.
Have not read, but looks fascinating.
Yes. Might have to pick that one up.
Might need to ship that one to me.
Yeah. Let's see. Do I have anything else here? Oh.
He's not getting it, folks.
Ship that one to me. I didn't hear you.
Yeah.
What was your joke?
I'm just... it's just... Don't worry about it.
I'm trying to make sure I cover all the emails that I wanted to read.
No, those were great emails.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it to all of you guys. And on the Cosmographia podcast, it's... I'm really excited about it.
Yeah.
It's really been just
it has been
fantastic experience doing this thing.
Yeah, and Kyle and I have this policy with podcasts because of the way we started ours is just like you just have to start recording the podcasts, even if nothing else is ready. Right, because you can dither around for months, like talking about websites and putting this together, and how are you going to do that, and what do we? We
don't have the the software that we really need to do it in a really ridiculously awesome video fashion.
Or hardware in some cases.
Yeah, but whatever.
Right.
It's the content.
Right. So the point is like just start recording the shows because that makes everything else happen.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's what we've been doing. And so the reason why we've been recording all these shows, even though we don't have the website and we don't have the RSS feed up and all that kind of stuff, is because our policy is record the shows once a week, no matter what. That will force everything to fall into line. So it is. We've been recording the shows with Randall, and it has been fantastic. And so the getting the thing started has been a little rocky, but everything will smooth out, and it's gonna be fantastic. So it's gonna be great.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's all I got. You got any stories?
No, I didn't even bother. Yeah. So
I heard that he's actually starting a. Go ahead.
I don't have an update.
No, yeah. So the update. I was
going to make something up.
Okay, the update that I read, I don't have the
Storm Area 51
Storm Area
update.
51 update. Is that the guy who made the Facebook event, that got millions of people to agree to go to it, is now trying to turn it into alien stock, like Woodstock, right? He's like, let's have a giant party in the area, and so he's trying to secure land in this big field out there, and he's going to try to and throw an alien stock,
really
a music
smart.
festival. Yeah, really good idea. So that's the latest Storm Area 51 update. Is they're like, no guys, really, we're just going to be partying,
and like it can be some crazy techno, and everybody can sort of like develop a Naruto run dance. That would be great.
Yeah.
It would be the new rave, you know? You got to have your arms behind you while you're raving.
Right. The Naruto stomp. Okay.
But, all right, we got this fantastic interview.
That's right.
It's good.
Yep. So we'll take a quick break and hope you guys enjoy the interview with David Mathisen. Welcome back. We are here with David Mathisen to talk about star myths and ancient connections, the Mathisen Corollary, which he has published books on. He's got a big website, a bunch of videos. He's been on Grimerica and a bunch of other podcasts. So I followed his work for years. I've not necessarily understood everything that he talks about, but I've definitely known about his work. So we wanted to get him on the podcast because we are going to appear with him at CAC 2020 in April. And Bryce Canyon do some stargazing, and he's gonna hold forth on what all this stuff means. So, what's up, David? Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, Russ and Kyle, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, man. I can't wait to go to Bryce. That's gonna be so much fun. Are you planning out a whole bunch of stuff? Or are you gonna wing it? What do you think?
Oh yeah, well, so I'm really looking forward to it. It's interesting because you guys were just talking as we were getting ready for the show. You were talking about the geology there where you are.
Yeah.
And obviously Bryce Canyon and Zion Canyon are part of an amazing geological part of the world. I mean, you don't really see, one thing that's really interesting is you don't see slot canyons distributed widely around the world. They're almost entirely in this region of the world.
Oh, wow.
And it's cataclysmic geology for sure. Yeah. So it's going to be a really special area that we're going to be located in. Bryce Canyon. Have you guys ever been there?
No, I haven't. We've been close, nearby, and so we know what the area looks like. But I was looking at pictures of the canyon. I'm just like, oh my god, it's amazing. It looks amazing. Yeah,
it's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
and it's supposed to be one of the best places in the world for stargazing because it's a desert. It's a high desert, so it's high altitude, like 5,000 to 8,000 foot elevation.
Yeah,
which is part of the geological story. This is an uplift.
Right.
That probably had to do with the Rocky Mountains pressing down and causing like a
isostatic
piston, causing an uplift, and then water being trapped up there and bursting catastrophically, creating slot canyons. Anyway, and I'm getting that from a geologist named Dr. Walt Brown, who has this theory about the hydroplate theory that I wrote. Actually, my first book incorporated a lot of geology, and whatever geology you subscribe to, I think it's pretty clear that there is cataclysmic geology as part of the story of humanity's ancient history and Earth's ancient history, and yet that gets totally glossed over. Like, you can't say cataclysmic.
Right.
You're not allowed to investigate that. That's forbidden.
Right. Especially if it's a global scale cataclysmic event, that they're just not. That just can't be part of it, right?
Well, that ties into what I'm talking about with the ancient myths being connected to the stars and based on the stars. At some point in history, that connection was also denied, and we were told they are literal. You have to take them literally. And then for the next 1,700 years, it was very rigidly enforced that you had to take specifically the Bible literally. Yeah. And then so the backlash against that, we're actually still experiencing with the uniformitarian geology. Why are they so against catastrophic geologies? Because for 17 centuries, you couldn't say anything but cataclysmic. So then there was a reaction against that.
The pendulum
so it's all ties together. Ties together. But anyway, back to the contact at the cabin. I'm really looking forward to it. Meet you guys in person. The Grimerica hosts, Darren and Graham, obviously putting it together. They'll be there. But we're going to be in a really special place. Yeah. What I was going to say is high desert, low moisture, should have great stargazing. We can't guarantee that.
Right. Can't guarantee the weather.
You don't get your money back if there's clouds. But I'm hoping that we'll have really, really good stargazing. We've planned it for a time when the moon won't be in the way. Yeah, it's not exactly a new moon, but the moon, it's getting close to a new moon, so the moon will be rising very, very early in the morning. So we should have, and it'll be a sliver. So we'll have great, we hope, opportunities to see the stars and see some of these constellations that I'm going to point out today. It's really not easy to see them unless you know what you're looking for. It takes kind of years to add to your collection. Okay, now I found, this is the first time I finally was able to pick that constellation out. So I'll be able to point out some constellations, and I'm hoping that many people will say, oh, wow, that's the first time I've ever been able to really identify that constellation, and then we'll of course tie it to the myths. So yeah, looking forward to it. It's gonna be great.
Oh yeah, me too, man.
Sounds awesome. Are you gonna use lasers? We're gonna have lasers, right?
Yeah, I don't want to say that online, but yeah, laser pointer. We don't want the authorities to show up, but it's a fully legal. It's a legal laser.
Yeah,
right.
This is not a deadly laser. It might pop a balloon.
Most powerful one you can have legally.
Okay, yeah.
And it shows up really well, but it is illegal to point any laser in the vicinity of any airplane. So we will need the Snake Brothers to be on the lookout. You can't actually watch what I'm talking about. You guys just have to look for airplanes. Right. So if we get into any trouble, I just point to Russ and Kyle.
Yeah, they were supposed to tell me. Sorry.
That's the plane. Yeah. Those are the plane watchers. Well, and the watcher.
Yeah, the watcher will help watch for planes too. I'm just like, I thought that was a UFO. I'm sorry. We can totally point lasers at UFOs.
So I wasn't going to play up the laser pointer too much on this show. But yes. So I went to a conference called the Conference on Precession and Ancient Knowledge in 2016.
Wow, that sounds
cool.
In
Southern California. Yeah, it was really great. Robert Schoch was there. John Anthony West, the late great John Anthony West, was there. So I had a chance to, really talk to him over. Stayed after dinner was done and just had long talks with John Anthony West and Robert Schoch.
Man, that must have been great.
Fantastic. But I used the laser. That was the first time I really rolled out the laser pointer and the bullhorn, the megaphone.
Yeah.
Say, okay, everybody, now look over at my pointer. And, get really good feedback. And so I'll just give a little plug while we're talking about Conference on Contact at the Cabin in April, which is almost sold out. So if you're watching and you want to go to that, you kind of got to get on it.
That's right.
The Conference on Precession and Ancient Knowledge. Yeah, the first one since that one in 2016 is coming up in early October. So I'll be talking at that. If you want to go to that, Robert Schoch will be there again. Alan Green, are you guys familiar with Alan Green?
Oh,
He's been on Grimerica. Yeah, he'll be talking there. Carmen Bolter, who made a movie which I've now am blanking on the name, but it's a well-known movie about mystical Egypt. I don't think that's the exact name of it. I don't think she made Magical Egypt, actually.
Pyramid Code? Okay, sorry, yeah. I'm just going to guess. I'm going to guess them all.
On the spot. But there'll be lots of great guests there.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to go to that, that's in October. It's a 3-day conference, 4th, 5th, and 6th, and you can get $50 off the price when you register by putting my last name, Mathisen, in the discount code. You get $50 off the price for that.
That's a good deal.
So, yeah, Watcher's now looking up what Carmen Bolter, she whatever he said, that's what she did. I guess it's Pyramid Code in New Atlantis.
Yeah.
She's very well known. She was at the last one as well. So
okay, good.
I just forgot, kind of blanked on the name of it, but now I understand what that little message was. Watcher looking up.
It's a question mark.
Yeah. Question mark?
It might have been a watcher guess. We're going to find out.
All right, cool. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to Contact at the Cabin with you guys. And the really cool thing about it is your ticket price for Contact at the Cabin also entitles you to a van ride with one of the Snake Brothers in Las Vegas. Zion and Bryce, right? I mean, we're running a shuttle. Just about everything's included.
Yeah.
You get your food, the lodging. Could be tents, it could be a pull-out bed, it could be a private room, depending on which one you select. But I think it's really selling out fast.
Yeah.
In fact, they've changed it to like almost sold out on the
There's actually a guy who's a big Grimerica fan. He's very involved with in their chats. So I'm in their chats too. So I see him every day. And he's actually just rented in a whole other cabin that's right next to it. And he's like, okay, so I've just secured this entire other cabin. So now we got to figure out how many people can get into that one. So a bunch of spots have opened up. It's just not clear how many yet. Darren's like, yeah, I need to figure this out. And but anyway, so one guy was just like, I'm gonna just rent my own cabin, and then we can put other people in there too. And we're just like, this is great. Cool. Yeah,
really cool. Yeah,
it's a great community.
So it's gonna be a great event, and Brandon Powell will be there doing the Wim Hof.
That's right.
Method. I don't know if this is going to be a YouTube video, right? So everyone will see Russ's tap out shirt.
That's right.
So we know that Brandon Powell is like he was a black belt in jiu-jitsu, I think in 2002.
Yeah.
So he knows
what he's doing.
Going head to head. He's going to be going head to head with Russ, I think.
Yeah. I'll be tapping out pretty quick, I think.
But he's going to be teaching us the Wim Hof breathing method. So that's going to be really cool. And submerging in ice water for those who want to do it and your doctor says it's okay.
Yeah. We did the breathing method with him at CAC 19 and it was awesome. He was just doing like 45-minute sessions early in the morning just to get everybody going. And taking part just in that very simple thing that he did in the morning was great. So I can't wait to really get involved with the whole, sort of a whole day process or a 6-hour thing that he's going to show us. And we also went to the hot springs and did cold water, hot water with him. That was awesome. Oh, nice. Pretty amazing experience. Yeah.
That's really cool.
It does take a little bit of, you look at that 40-degree water and you're like, do I really want to get in there and sit down? Not really.
No.
You don't want to. And then
it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Then you get in there and your whole body is going, what are you doing? We're about to die. So very cool experience. So, okay. So I'm sorry, back to your work. So tell us how you got started on all this. You've sort of been working on this for years, right? How long have you been doing this?
Yeah, so really 10 years of writing books and blog posts that had to do with exploring, well, really 10 years. I guess the blog started in 2011 and my first book came out in 2011, but it was really around 2009 that I started really becoming interested in the connections between the myths and the stars. And that had, I'll just tell you a shortened version. Graham Hancock's book, Heaven's Mirror.
Yes.
Which he wrote with his wife, Santa's full color photography on almost every page. It's like a glossy pictures. I bought that book for my mother because my dad and mom were going to Machu Picchu. And I wanted a cool book. I've always been interested in myths, mummies, pyramids. Even when I was little, we used to make mummies out of masking tape around popsicle sticks at school, like when we were studying Egypt. In fact, the Tutankhamun, the King Tut exhibit came around when I think it was 1979. So I was 9 or 10 years old. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. It came to San Francisco, the King Tut exhibit. So I got to see the golden headdress and it was a big deal.
Yeah.
Because they don't tour that stuff around very much. So I was fascinated with Egypt, ancient Egypt, from an early age. But anyway, my parents were going to Machu Picchu. I said, I want to get a cool book about Machu Picchu because it was my mom's birthday coming up. I got her Heaven's Mirror because it features Machu Picchu in part of it. And I didn't really know that much about Graham Hancock. I was just searching around and I was like, oh, this is neat. It incorporates star alignments and Machu Picchu. So then I started looking into more Graham Hancock and reading his books. And you guys have mentioned Fingerprints of the Gods. And
that changed your life.
References, yeah, for sure. But I would say, it changed my life, but it's almost like you're already searching for that stuff.
Yes.
It's like there's all these pieces in your past that kind of, you go, ooh, these are all coming together.
Right.
I've always been interested in the stars since I was little. I've always been interested in the myths. And in fact, even before this, I had already taught mythology, the Odyssey, at the college level. I got an opportunity while I was in the Army to go back and teach at West Point in the Department of English, Literature, and Philosophy. And I was teaching English literature, and the Odyssey was one of the texts which I've always loved, even since I was a child. So when I found this later, Graham Hancock, what he was talking about, and specifically when he pointed to Hamlet's Mill, which you guys are probably familiar with Hamlet's Mill.
Yes.
But a lot of, Graham Hancock and many others reference Hamlet's Mill. It was published in 1969. It was very, seminal. It caused a lot of, reevaluation of things.
Yeah.
Among certain people, it was
scholars hated it.
Criticized and scoffed and marginalized by the conventional academic community. But it was two scholars, two professors, Herta von Decken and Giorgio de Santillana, and they published this book in 1969, which talks about not just connections between the myths and the stars, but actually an ancient system that includes number, that includes meter, like verse, well, you guys are musicians, that includes music, that includes math, that includes alignments of monuments, and even proportions of monuments that relate to processional numbers. And they pointed it out in many myths. They pointed out processional numbers in the Norse myths and in the Sanskrit ancient texts, the Vedas. Well, that was, when I started reading that, I was like, I became like the guy who has the shed out back and has the red string, connecting everything. I'm like, okay, I've got to figure this out further. They've basically said there's something going on here, and they're speaking a language, but they don't really translate the language for you. So I became like, okay, we got to map this out.
Right. Figure
this out.
Yep. You start drawing lines on your walls. Yeah.
Exactly. That started in about 2009. By 2011, I'd written my first book on it. And really, that first book, I'll throw one more little piece into it and then throw it back to you guys. I was still taking the Bible literally when I wrote that first book. So the first book talks about flood geology. And although I don't say, well, this is true because the Bible says it is, certainly the fact that there's flood geology around the world fit in with my biblical worldview.
Yes.
But at the same time, I was also talking about, well, there seems to be this connection between the myths and the stars. And I thought that connection between the myths and the stars might have had something to do with the flood. Maybe the flood, there's evidence that the Earth might have rolled, had a big roll. That's why Antarctica is so important, because we've got palm tree and enormous dinosaur fossils in Antarctica. Well, how do you get palm trees in Antarctica? Even if it wasn't covered with ice,
there's not enough sunlight.
It doesn't get very much rain. It doesn't get enough sunlight half the year. I mean, if it's in darkness half the year, you're not growing palm trees there. And it also has, gigantic, like Brachiosaurus size, bigger than Brontosaurus size fossils there. And you really don't get that large of animals to be able to find enough food to eat.
Yeah. If you gotta have
unless the Earth might have rolled or Antarctica might have moved. So
that's right. Yeah.
And so at first I thought that might be the connection.
Yeah. So you're talking about a pole shift? You mean you're talking about a pole shift or maybe a crustal shift or something? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. So what happened was I got really into the connection between the stars and the myths, and that's where I'm really focused now.
Yeah.
So I don't pretend to be an expert. I don't talk too much about the geology anymore, but the geology, the model of Dr. Walt Brown, who's also a West Point graduate, class of 59, he has this geology called the hydroplate theory. The hydroplate theory incorporates an actual roll of the Earth because of the shifting weight distribution. Actually, the Pacific Ocean basin becomes extremely deep in certain places. I don't want to go too long on this, but the Pacific Ocean basin, like the Mariana Trench, those trenches form these arc and cusp shapes, which are very hard to explain with the conventional plate tectonics. They make these arcs and cusps. I could share my screen, and actually maybe I should just...
Yeah, that's it. We love the geology and all that stuff on
I know
this podcast.
You guys do, because I hear you guys talking about it. So let's share my screen real quick. Let's minimize the Snake Brothers. Can you see the Stellarium there?
Yeah, we see it.
All right, right on. So there's my blog. Actually, so I've got a website. This was started, the name of my first book was the Mathisen Corollary. So I've got a blog that's called the Mathisen Corollary. But more recently, I started a more comprehensive website called Star Myths of the World. And it's got the blog is there. So you can see the blog in this Star Myths of the World website too. Can you guys see that website?
We see it. Yep.
And then you've also got video and podcasts and things like that there. But they're both fully searchable. So if I were to just put in the word cusps, we would find some, here's your subduction in the conventional theory that explains, well, these are some Wikipedia pictures that I took. This is obviously back in 2013. But the problem is, this is actually the Mariana Trench right here. You have this all the way around the Pacific, you have these, I'll stop moving so you can see it, very deep arcs and cusps. And it's hard to explain exactly how a big plate is subducting down
in a curve like that.
Yeah, okay.
In a curve, like,
I gotcha.
Is this plate like all shrinking down from all these directions and going under this little tongue right here?
Right.
Like you guys mentioned you live in a tongue and groove architecture. It's like, okay, so we got tongue and groove architecture going on here at the bottom of the ocean. And I guess this whole plate from all these different directions, from the 1 o'clock, from the 3 o'clock, and from the 6 o'clock is all going down into the Mariana Trench. That's
very interesting. That's so actually, great observation.
It's not my observation. As Dr. Walt Brown said, it looks like the whole Pacific, if you took your thumb and punched into a ping pong ball, just pressed into a ping pong ball, you would get these exact same arcs and cusps.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
I see.
He doesn't argue that a gigantic thumb pressed into the Pacific, but what he actually argues is that the Pacific basin was sucked down from below. And then all the continents started sliding towards that giant hole. And that's why you get these massive mountains along the Ring of Fire. And that's why you get these volcanoes all the way around the Pacific in the Ring of Fire, because the whole Pacific basin sucked down, everything slid towards it. The front edge of the friction got very hot and created a bunch of magma, and we still have volcanic activity. And then those mountains going up caused, weight distribution changes, and actually the Himalayas, when they got piled up higher and higher, caused the Earth to actually roll.
Wow.
Because of the principles of physics. That's his argument. And so therefore, that roll took Antarctica from a more temperate latitude all the way down to where it is today. And that, that's why Antarctica is so important.
Yes.
And that's why you're not allowed to go there, according to Flat Earth Theory. I'm only bringing that up as I don't believe Flat Earth can go down that route.
I hope we're getting some distortion here. Are you still there?
Freaking flat earthers sent us a thunderstorm right when he was getting down to business. Hold on a second. And we're back.
Yeah.
After the Flat Earth Society tried to shut us down.
That's right. Yanked our internet connection. Everything went down, but we were able to reconnect. So here we are.
Yeah, you can't visit Antarctica, and you can't even talk about it.
That's right. Don't even say the word, man. We just got back connected. Let's talk about stars.
Yeah, great. So anyway, we were talking kind of about how I got into it, and
yes,
I'm not sure how sometimes you got to keep me on the path or I'll wander off into other interesting areas to explore.
Oh, yeah.
So
no problem.
So anyway, it was really the Hamlet's Mill was talking about, hey, there is something going on worldwide. I was already extremely interested in the stars from a child, in the myths, even from a child. And then when I saw Hamlet's Mill talking about there's a connection between the stars and the myths, that's when I really started getting into it. In my first book, I think that's how we got off track. I was talking about how my first book, it does talk about connections between the stars and the myths. It also has a lot of geology discussion in there as well. And then sometime in between my first book and my second book, what happened was I started realizing I was comfortable looking at connections between the stars and the myths. I was not comfortable looking at the connection between the stars and the Bible. And in Hamlet's Mill, every now and then they'll talk about, well, now look, the same thing is going on in the story of Samson, and we see, this jawbone weapon being used in the Samson story. We see it being used in a Maui story of the Pacific. We see it even in a myth in South America. And that got me a little bit uncomfortable because I was saying, okay, well, I'm fine seeing the connection between the stars and the myths, but certainly the Bible is literal. A lot of my identity was tied up in that. This is not uncommon in the in the United States today, and around the world, of course. And I think I'll just say quickly, I think the stories of the Bible are full of truth and beauty. I just don't think they're literal anymore. In fact, what happened was, against my own, I was arguing against, well, that can't possibly be, but because I knew the Bible very well, I knew the stars very well, and I started to kind of learn more and more about the system as I was probing it. It eventually became too much evidence for me to hold on to the idea that the Bible was literal. So I had to go through a little bit of a paradigm shift of my own. So in between book 1 and book 2, I basically came to the conclusion that the Bible is not literal, that actually all the stories, virtually every character and event in the Bible from start to finish, are also based on the same system of celestial metaphor that's operating around the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that transition, because that happened to us too. We were raised in a Christian household, so we knew the Bible pretty well, and then just being raised with it, you sort of are, as a kid, you sort of take it literally, right? But then as we started looking at all these other myths, and then you start seeing there's Sumerian connections, and there's Akkadian and Egyptian connections to the stories and the people, and then you see the other, like even oral traditions of other peoples around the world, and you start to see, there are these similar elements in the backgrounds of all these stories. And then we began to say, okay, you look at this, you change yourself to look at this text as an ancient text, right? Rather than looking at it religiously, I guess is the answer, is what I'm getting at. So and
I think they're talking about the myth. While I was waiting for you guys, I was watching. I just said, well, I'm going to watch a video with Professor Andrew George. Professor Andrew George is the premier translator of the Gilgamesh text. So he's got some great videos online, and I was watching him discussing the difference between myth, folklore, and fairy tale, and he had this nice graph. But he was discussing the definition of myth, and he was lamenting the fact that too much we assign myth as like children's stories, and we say, oh, this is good to tell children about, but really myth is about, and a lot of it is not necessarily what you want to be exposing children to, because myth can be extremely disturbing, bizarre, graphic, violent, and sexual. It is talking about, and I'm not implying here that Professor Andrew George agrees with what I say, that all the myths are based on the stars.
Right.
But I'm just recounting what he was saying. Myth is about the exploration of these deep questions about our condition in this human life. It's about those deep questions. So when I say that the Bible is not literal, I was just recently on another podcast. They kind of all tend to cluster together. It's like no podcast.
Then
podcast.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody wants it at the same time. It's like the stars line up, or the planets. But what I said was, it's like the Gandalf character in Lord of the Rings, where you remember when they're trying to go over Caradhras in the mountain pass, and Boromir's like plowing through the snow with his body, trying to get them over the mountains, and Saruman is sending the storms to stop them. You remember that? And so they ended up getting turned around. They couldn't go over the mountain. Yeah. So they had to try and do what?
Go through it. Go under. Yeah.
Go under it. And who was against that? Boromir kept saying, "Hey, we got to turn back," and Gandalf was like, "No, I don't want to turn back," because he didn't want to go.
He didn't want to go down
the mines of Moria, because he knew what was down there, right? Right. And in the books, and I think in the movie too, it talks about what happened to all those dwarves down there, dwarfs? Why are the mines of Moria empty? Because they delved too deep. They had this wonderful kingdom, but they kept going deeper and deeper. They were never satisfied. They delved too deep and they woke something up. Well, I use that metaphor as kind of like I was delving into the stars and the myths connection.
Yeah.
I wasn't really wanting to delve into the stars and the Bible connection, but I woke up, you get more than you bargained for.
Yes.
And you can delve too deep. So if you're someone who takes the Bible literally, this is like your last warning, turn off the podcast.
Yeah, turn back now.
But because you may not like what you find there, but what's even more interesting about that metaphor is Gandalf, he encounters the Balrog, right? And he actually goes through, there's no more Gandalf the Grey, but he comes back as a different Gandalf, right? Not better, but he's more ready to fight Sauron now because he's gone through that experience. Is it two different Gandalfs? No, it's the same Gandalf, and that's important to the myths. Also, we have this kind of twin pattern. I really liked your guys' discussion of Enkidu and Gilgamesh. That was fantastic. So we can get into twins. There's not two Gandalfs. It's one Gandalf, same Gandalf, but there's two aspects to him. The point of the metaphor is you may lose something in not seeing the Bible literally anymore, but frankly, I think you see something even better, deeper, more true. There's a quotation I love that is from Alvin Boyd Kuhn, who says these myths of the world are 1,000 times more precious as myth than as alleged literal history. So, I did lose my belief that the Bible was literal, but I see it as even more precious and true than ever. Like it describes the human condition and what we're all going through in ways that are just astonishing and take your breath away. So long answer.
That's awesome. No, that's great. Yeah. And I agree that the Gandalf thing, it's like there's a trial by fire there, right? The Balrog symbolizes the trial by fire, and then he comes back as Gandalf the White. Like he has gone through the trial by fire. So yeah, I agree that metaphor is that works very well for this kind of paradigm changing thing. It is a trial by fire. Whether you're doing it for the Bible or any kind of worldview, doesn't matter. If you start delving deeply into some subjects and you're coming up against long held beliefs that maybe you've never even looked at really, and it starts bumping up against them, and you're like, oh, that's uncomfortable. And then suddenly, bam, the whole thing shifts, and it's freeing. It's a very enlightening and freeing sensation. So.
Right. Yeah. So we'll maybe get into some more about what that means about the two Gandalfs or the twins, because actually I think it applies to each one of our lives in ways that are really practical. For a long time, I felt like I was talking about the myths and the stars, and people are like, but why would they do that? Because they're conveying these profound truths in ways that help us to grasp them. And it's stuff that we need like right in this very present moment that I would say just about everyone is wrestling with. So
and so the other thing that we kind of talk about this is that like the sky is the tapestry upon which you paint these stories, right? And there are multiple reasons for doing that, because like you look at the wisdom traditions of many native peoples or whatever, and they have all these oral stories, traditions, myths, legends, whatever you want to call them, about places on the planet. So they'll have this mountain and that, and they have all these stories associated with that mountain, and the stories often have lessons to teach you, and they're not necessarily literal stories, but they tell you how this mountain formed, but inside that, all these, this giant was there and he was fighting the gods or whatever, so there's lessons built into that. But that mountain may not be there for very long. It may be there a very long time, but that the stars are eternal. Right. So when you're encoding myths into something that you want to last for a very long time, you use the stars, because unlike the surface of the planet, especially if we think about humans going through catastrophic periods where everything changes and mountains do disappear and new ones completely reappear, you tell your stories in the stars because those don't change. Right.
Yeah. Well, I think there's probably a lot of really good reasons why they are using the stars. But what I'll say about the native traditions that are maybe talking about a mountain is don't be so sure that they're not talking about a mountain that's in the stars. So it's as above, so below.
Okay.
And so actually what's really fascinating is, you know, the Native American traditions like the Lakota Sioux had a pattern that they would actually follow as they moved throughout the year. They would centered on their sacred mountains, the Black Hills and the what's called Devil's Tower. You know, today, you know, you saw it in what's that movie? Close Encounters is all about Devil's Tower. Well, that was a sacred mountain. Well, but actually, they say right in their own traditions that these are reflecting the stars. These are actually reflections on Earth of something that's also happening in the stars.
Okay, yeah.
And,
that's true.
And their movement around those landmarks throughout the year, what's really fascinating is if you look at the Psalms in the so-called Old Testament, the Psalms are these different songs, these verses. They're all in verse, right? Most of them are attributed to David, the sweet singer of Israel, right? He had the harp, or you know, he's playing on the lyre. That's celestial, by the way. There's a harp in the sky. But if you look at the Psalms closely, if you read through them, I used to actually read. I had like a pattern. I would read through them in a year. So these number of Psalms, but you'll see a Psalm of ascents, a Psalm for going down to Jerusalem. The Psalms are actually talking about a pattern of movement as well, exactly like what I was just talking about with the different Native Americans that had a pattern throughout the year. Well, we make camp here in the spring underneath this, you know, terrain feature, but it's also related to the stars. Well, the Psalms are also talking about at this time of year, this is when we go down to this point, or then we go up to this mountain. It's a Psalm of ascents. We read this ascending, you know, a Psalm of ascending the mountain. So I think around the world, there's a system, an ancient worldwide system that is based on the stars. And actually, the Native American traditions can be shown to be, those characters can be shown to be based on the stars. And the traditions in the Australian Aboriginal sacred stories shown to be based on the stars. And in Africa and in the Pacific, just the same as the stories in the Bible. And I think they're all using the same system, which is, that's the part that will get you into trouble with the academics, because you might be able to publish an article that says, hey, look at how this Greek myth is based on the stars. And somebody might be very interested in that. And then if you say, and by the way, it's using the exact same system that's used by the Maya.
Yeah, then you get in trouble.
Just a minute now. What are you talking about? That cannot be, because that really runs up against the paradigm.
Yes, that's the isolationist. So so this is more diffusionism, right? This is what they call it in the academia, the diffusion. It's it's closer to diffusion. It's not quite, right? Really.
Yeah. So that's it. I mean, no, I love how much you guys are really like students of this. So I was really looking forward to this conversation. I'm not trying to be prickly, but diffusionism is kind of implies, well, you know, the Egyptians must have gotten into a boat and sailed over to, you know, trade with the, you know, the Americas at one point. And actually there is evidence that, hey, we've got tobacco being found in the mummy wrappings of Ramesses. You know, how did that get there if tobacco was only found in the New World? There must have been actually some trade going on. But
some trade going across, yeah.
So, but those cultures are not just far apart, but like the Maya Popol Vuh is, you know, from, well, I think they're all very ancient, but I'm not sure that they were spread by diffusion. I think they were probably all going back to an even more ancient common predecessor, because this system's already in place by the time of ancient Egypt. By the start of ancient Egypt, the system's already in place. By the start of ancient Mesopotamia, it appears this system's already in place. So I think it comes from some even more ancient culture, and probably everyone around the world has, you know, descended or remnants from that. Not necessarily that they were going back and forth spreading it later. That's what I'm giving.
I get what you're saying. Yeah, there's arguments I've seen where these scholars are saying like, look, so you see these similarities, like say for example between this culture A and culture B's stories, myths, traditions, writings, paintings, whatever. You see these similarities, but they're not similar enough to demonstrate that there was contact and exchange of these ideas between these cultures. Instead, the similarities look more like they both stem from a single ancient source. That's what you're talking about.
Right.
There was rather than diffusion, diffusionism. It actually just there's some incredibly ancient source that has gone worldwide with all, and so everybody has pieces of it in all of their histories and stuff. Yeah.
And here's where the catastrophe part comes in. What may have happened was there was an ancient culture or cultures that went through a catastrophe, and they had to kind of go underground, and then later remnants of it were remembered. This is possibly what happened, because I think a catastrophe is probably included in there somewhere. But the opposite of diffusionism is isolationism. And so you have some people say, oh, everything must have been isolated. It's quite possible that they were isolated for many, many centuries or millennia if they're all remnants of some ancient culture that got wiped out by a cataclysm or catastrophe of some sort. They may have been isolated. Some of them may have had some contact, but it's not necessarily that the Egyptians brought their stories to the Americas or vice versa. It could be that there was some contact, but it didn't necessarily, that's not where the stories got swapped. It's because these stories are already in the most ancient Egyptian texts. They're in the Maya texts. They're even in some of the ancient ruins. The connections are even in some of the ancient stone ruins, like at Tiwanaku. We can get to that. So it's already there in the Americas. They didn't get it from the Egyptians, I don't think. It was probably something even more ancient. And that's where you get into like Göbekli Tepe type time frame, really ancient.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that to me is like, if you try to go with a diffusionist idea with academics, they don't like that. They're like, no, because, mainstream academia, what we call the standard model of archaeology, is very isolationist. So then you agree with them. You're like, okay, you're right. Isolation is correct. But the reason they have all these similarities is because of some incredibly ancient advanced source from in prehistory. Then they get mad again, right?
Right.
They don't you can't win.
That's why. That's the problem. That's the problem. So they have to argue that they all sprang up kind of independently of one another.
Yes.
And what the connection with the stars and the myths shows is these connections are pretty compelling, and they're also a little bit arcane in that you wouldn't expect the same types of ways of looking at the stars to pop up independently many, many places around the world. And it'll become more clear if I show some stuff. But anyway, we're kind of laying the groundwork here as we talk about it, kind of as what I'm talking about and what might have happened to explain this.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask you about the idea of this, the creation of these myths being somewhat of like a technology. That's the way we've talked about it before, because it seems to have this ability to stick with people. Like when why else are we repeating them? It's almost like they're designed for us to want to retell them over and over and over.
Yeah.
And the fact that they can encode so much truth yet be compelling stories, it's like, man, who developed this? And did they do it on purpose? Was it
amazing,
a purposeful thing?
Those are really good observations, because it is absolutely right. I mean, I think the more you look at them, the more you have that response of just like astonishment. Where did this come from? It was a extremely sophisticated, spiritually sophisticated, whether or not technologically sophisticated. I mean, there's some evidence that they were moving some big stones around a long time ago. But whoever came up with this had like a psychological insight and spiritual insight that is just breathtaking. Breathtaking. So those are great. And right now, listeners or viewers may be going, this is all kind of like cloudy and misty, and these guys are like diving into their own navels. So in a second, we should show some of the evidence, But I think Brett was also popping up a little message that he had some.
Yeah, Brett, come on. You got a question, buddy? Come on, buddy.
He's writing it. And that's all right. I've always felt that every major religious construct went away. Send it again, Brett.
Just jump in, buddy.
Yeah, come on and ask your question, buddy.
No.
All right. Well, I made it easy for myself because I wrote it out so I could read it. So I've always felt that like every major religion, right? They're for the most part they're delivering the same message. They're different stories with different characters, but at the core of all of them, you have the same principle, the same lesson. And I was wondering, would you say that this connection to the stars is the background mechanism that creates that commonality? Is that why we see so much similarity between all the different religions of the world?
Yeah, great question. I mean, this is all the right areas to explore when we're talking about this stuff, because what I really think it is, I don't know that it comes from the connection to the stars. I think another metaphor I've used a lot, and people might go, oh no, he's going to use the Karate Kid again. But it's like Mr. Miyagi has to impart something to Daniel-san that is not exactly easy to impart, right?
Right.
This fighting system, and he's got to do it in a way that's effective because Daniel-san really needs it. So you already have to be a master, is what I'm saying. Mr. Miyagi had to be a master to come up with, okay, what can I use to teach this kid that's at hand? Well, how about wax on, wax the car?
Okay,
it's pretty clear that he's already such a master that he can use whatever's at hand. He says, okay, these cars, that will work. That's probably not how he learned or his great-great-grandfather learned, because they probably didn't have cars 500 years ago. But Mr. Miyagi was such a master, he already knew what he needed to impart, so he was able to use wax on, wax off to impart something completely different, the system of karate. So
I love that.
Great
metaphor. Is somebody giving you crap for that metaphor? That's a great one.
It's a fantastic metaphor.
Great. So at least we know Kyle has not heard it before, because he had the hands in the air response. That's wonderful. Yeah. So I'll throw another metaphor to try and answer Brett. Let me mix or switch metaphors real quick. So I see in the background you have this cloth, right? This cloth behind you. So this metaphor that I've used before, Brett, to kind of answer that question for myself is, let's pretend you have a room full of furniture. And that furniture represents those truths that you think are the same around the world. Because I agree with you. I think these truths are the same being illustrated around the world. It's the same furniture, but we're going to cover it with different cloths. Because here's the other part of the metaphor. The furniture is invisible. So you've got a room full of invisible furniture. So how am I going to tell Kyle and Russ, hey, don't run into that chair if they can't see it?
Right.
We're talking about things that have to do with invisible matters, or hard to grasp matters, or hard to see matters. Questions like, how is it that I can get a premonition or a synchronicity, or I can get this message in the middle of the night and wake up and I've got this great song to share with the world? Or, you guys are musicians. I'm trying to use metaphors.
Yes.
Where did that come from? It's kind of like Led Zeppelin would sometimes talk about, well, this song just kind of came to us. It was almost like it came to us from the gods or something. Where did that come from? Well, it came from this invisible realm. So we're talking about invisible furniture. So how are we going to see the invisible furniture? We'll put some sheets over it and we'll be able to see the outlines of the chair. And in some cultures, the sheet might have really thick embroidery and like plush, almost like a rug, and figures that are really elaborate. Like the myths of ancient India, they have so many gods and goddesses.
Yes.
It would take you your whole life to even read about all of them, right?
Right.
It's actually the same thing with Egypt and Babylonia and Mesopotamia. They have so many different gods and goddesses. And so that's very, I would say, elaborate. But then you've got like the Tao Te Ching, the Tao, like Taoism, or Buddhism. Buddhism is usually taught as, oh, this is a reaction against all those thousands of gods of ancient India. So they stripped it down to Buddha meditating under a tree, it's a lot more relatable. Let's not get into all these gods and goddesses. Well, it's actually illuminating the same truths. And in my most recent book, I talk about how the Buddha story is actually based on the stars. A lot of the metaphors in the Tao are based on the stars. It's all using the same system, but it's like, well, we could have a very kind of thin, gauzy, almost transparent sheet over those chairs. If you don't want lots of pictures, that's too much for you. You don't want thousands of gods all over the carpet. Fine, we'll cover the chairs with a different cloth if that's more to your taste. You want like simple, like super stripped down, almost ascetic decoration. Then we'll put that kind of cloth over it. But we're still illuminating the same truths. It's like, which one speaks to you better? Right. And so I think around the world we've got the same truths. To answer Brett's excellent question, the same underlying invisible truths are being illuminated by these different myth systems. And if you don't like the story of Samson or the story of Solomon, if that's been wrecked for you because of your childhood experience, at this point, there's nothing stopping you from going to the story of the Buddha if you want to figure out how to, if that speaks to you better.
You want to look at the same truth is what you're talking about.
I'm saying I think it's the same truth, and some ancient, however this ancient system was created, then maybe it got its different variations in those thousands of years after this cataclysm. You know, different people put their different spins and cultural, the Norse myths have a totally different feel from the myths of ancient India, right?
Yes.
Like Norse myths is like grim, dark, lots of snow, lots of ice. Yeah. It's like harsh. Axes. India is like flowers fall down from the sky. When the gods are happy, like flowers rain down from the sky. I can't really see Thor like sending down a shower of flowers, right? It's like it takes on the different personalities of the different regions, but it's still the same truths. And in fact, there's some amazing connections between the Norse myths and the myths of ancient India, and even the myths of ancient Japan, and even in the Bible, or even some of the carvings in Central America, like that great one that I was totally unprepared for. It totally surprised me was when I was doing the Norse myths. I have a book on the Norse myths. I found connections. I would argue connections that I argue in this book to the tomb of Pakal. You guys probably know the great sarcophagus lid of Pakal, which is usually argued as, well, this is obviously an ancient astronaut who's, looks like he's doing manipulating a spaceship. I would argue that that's actually, there are some amazing parallels between that lid, it's celestial, and some of the aspects of what happens in Ragnarok in the Norse myths. So those are connections that you wouldn't even expect.
Right. So it's so basically what you're doing, I think of as comparative mythology, except you're also looking at like constellations and including the star myths into it, right? That's what I think of.
Absolutely
what
right.
Doing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely right. So there's comparative mythology courses and degrees, and you can get a PhD in it, right?
Yes.
But they have a big problem. How are they going to explain all these connections? And so, there's been various attempts to do that. Well, we all have human psychology, and so we're wrestling with these same questions, and so maybe we come up with some similar things. Or then there's the collective unconscious explanation of, Carl Jung, the collective unconscious. Well, maybe there's some kind of collective unconscious. I'm not saying that that's wrong. That may be in there. But it's pretty clear that they're all based on the stars. This is my, not my solo contribution to this, because people have been talking about connections to the stars and the myths for thousands of years. But I would argue that whether or not we've got a collective unconscious, there is pretty clear evidence of an ancient worldwide system that is based on the stars that explains these. Some of these parallels are very, very hard to explain. I'll try and show some of them. But if they're all descended from some ancient worldwide system, not necessarily recently, maybe cataclysm thousands of years before the Egyptians, even thousands of years before Mesopotamia, thousands of years before ancient India, ancient China, that would also explain it. So academia right now doesn't want to Now they've got a king-size problem with Göbekli Tepe. How do we explain that? Eventually, when they finally say, okay, it looks like there was some kind of sophisticated stuff going on 6,000 years earlier than we thought, or maybe 8,000. Now it maybe doesn't become such a problem to say, well, maybe the roots of this system that we find worldwide comes from something very ancient.
That has almost been totally lost.
But they get mad if you say that that those symbols on those pillars are constellations. They're the same.
They don't like that yet.
And they'll come around eventually. Here's what will happen is, so it's like if you're trying to put an engine back together. Have you guys ever taken an engine apart and put it back together? I have. And I come up with a bunch of like Ziploc baggie full of like bolts, or I'm like, these were on the engine before. I've got the whole thing put back together. I'm not very mechanically inclined, and I got my Ziploc bag. Well, if you've got a theory that's trying to explain everything that's going on, and you've got a bunch of bolts that don't fit, you didn't put the engine together completely exactly right.
That's right.
So eventually someone comes along and goes, well, you know what? You've actually got your alternator run upside down here, and your manifolds, if you just do it this way, everything will fit perfectly. And you go, whoa, okay. Yeah. Well, that's happened thousands of times over the centuries as we've gone, how did all these continents get here? And then one guy goes, well, if you explain it with plate tectonics, a whole bunch more stuff would fit together. And everyone's like, are you kidding? That's ridiculous. There's no way that these continents could have drifted.
Yeah.
And Alfred Wegener proposed that in 1906. And it was ridiculed. He was ridiculed and laughed out of the halls of academia. Well, by the 1960s and 70s, they finally, after World War II and like submarines and more submarine technology, and they found these like ridges and stuff on the bottom of the ocean, they said, oh, maybe the bottoms of the ocean haven't been one solid thing forever. Maybe this plate tectonics would explain it. And then by the time I was a kid in the 70s, I was taught plate tectonics, and it was still pretty radical that it was being taught in the schools. I went to a Montessori school. My mom's a big Montessori teacher, and in this Montessori school, which is itself a bit of a challenge to the conventional paradigm, right?
Yes.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but
I know
they were teaching some radical ideas. Yeah. So Brett says he did too. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good job, Watcher. So that's why you're into this stuff.
That's right. We were homeschooled. He was Montessori.
You guys had some non-standard education. So there were some radical ideas being introduced to me in the 70s, like plate tectonics when I was in first, second, and third grade. That was still just breaking its way in the 60s and 70s. Well, in the 60s, they were, I think, in academy, like in the university, they were starting to accept it.
Right.
They finally got around to like starting teaching it to kids in the 70s and 80s. That's how long it took from 1906, Alfred Wegener. So I think eventually Göbekli Tepe is like a huge, it's not just a bolt, it's like a whole crankshaft left out of the engine. They're like, what the heck? What do we do with this thing? We're gonna have to design this whole engine. And eventually someone will say, well, this outline that guys like Graham Hancock and John Anthony West and Carmen Bolter have been talking about incorporates that crankshaft rather nicely. And then they go, okay, I guess we have to start building engines this way now. So eventually I think it happens.
Yeah. And the final test is when you turn the key. Does it run? If it runs, you built it right. All right.
Right. I would say right now, it's not that it doesn't run. It's probably firing on like 3 cylinders out of 8.
That's right.
So it's like moving down the street, and they're like, "Don't mess with my engine. We're moving forward."
Yeah.
But wait, we could get all 8 of your cylinders firing if we just put this crankshaft in. Oh no! Wait! Don't come to me with that heretical crankshaft. Telling me there was people 10,000 years ago making smooth stones aligned with ours. That would mess up my engine. Okay.
Yeah, crankshaft is good because that's what they call us too. Bunch of cranks.
That's right. Cranks. So,
all right, so let's look at some stars.
See some stuff. All right.
Yeah.
So that's the whole reason I'm doing this pesky video stuff instead of the more intimate, just podcast voice. Hopefully, people who are listening can get the gist of what we're saying without the visual, and then they can jump in and go see you know, a lot of these images are on my blog and things too. So let's pull up Stellarium, and I will share my screen with you.
I'm gonna actually kill our video feed because we're getting a little bit of storm lag again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're getting mad that you're about to show us some round sky.
Okay, so what should we do? Restart it? Are you rebooting it, Kyle?
No. We just turned our video off, so we could still see your screen share though.
Okay, it says I'm sharing, so you can see the stars there.
Yep.
Right on. So, as you guys immediately pointed out earlier when we were testing this before the show, you said, "Oh, you're looking south." Well,
Yes.
Why am I looking south? I'm looking south because I'm in the northern hemisphere, and that's the direction that you look in order to see the zodiac if you're in the northern hemisphere. Because I believe we're on a sphere. That's why. So I've got the, we can turn off those sphere grids. The sky itself appears to be a sphere turning over us.
Yes.
Because we're on a Earth that's spinning, I would argue, but we're not going to get off that discussion. But if we're orbiting the sun, and if we're on a sphere, and we're on the northern half of that sphere, if you can just kind of envision it, if all the listeners can envision, you're on a sphere, you're on the northern half of it, and the Earth is orbiting around the sun, and all the other planets are also orbiting around the sun in the same solar system on roughly the same disk. I know we're also moving through the galaxy, but then in order to look at the background stars that those planets will go through, or that the sun will go through, from the northern hemisphere, you're going to have to look down towards the equator. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. So if you're standing on the northern hemisphere, you look south to see the ecliptic, right?
Yeah, the ecliptic is what that plane is called that we're orbiting on. So if everybody would just suspend argument on flat Earth or spherical Earth and pretend we're on a sphere. And now, just for a second, let's pretend the sphere is straight up and down. There's no tilt to our. Okay. Now the equator will be exactly lined up with the plane that we're going around the sun with, right?
Right.
Can everyone imagine that? This doesn't even require video. So now, if I want to look towards that ecliptic plane, if I'm in the northern half of the ball, I'm going to look south. If I'm in the southern half, I'm going to look north, right? And so, but I won't be able to see. I'm up here in latitude 35 or so. It says right there on my screen. I'm not actually going to be able to see all the way down to the equator if we're on an Earth that's spherical, right? Because as I'm looking south, eventually that curve of the Earth is going to get in the way, right?
Yes.
It's like the fatness of the Earth's belly is going to prevent me from seeing the belt around its waist if the belt is the equator, right? I'm looking down, I'm trying to see my belt buckle, and I'm like, oh, the Earth is too round. I can't see the belt buckle, right? So that's what's happening. That's why the plane of the ecliptic, so now the Earth is tilted. Now tilt the Earth a little bit in your mind. What'll happen is that ecliptic will actually tilt above the equator. And so when I'm looking, but it'll be lower towards the equator and higher towards the equator, depending on which direction that tilt, how much I've tilted and whether I'm tilted towards the sun or away from the sun. So when I'm tilted,
time of year?
Yeah, so when I'm tilted, when the North Pole is tilted directly towards the sun, the ecliptic plane is going to be higher through the sky, and that's why in the daytime we get the sun traveling on this much higher arc. Okay, I've said a lot of stuff. Let's now show it to people. So I'm going to put those grid squares back in, and now I'm going to take away the bulge of the Earth, right? I'm going to make the fat belly of the Earth transparent so that we can see the belt buckle. Okay. Let me try and do that. Oops. And I'm going to do that by taking away the ground. Boom. So now we can see all the way down to the southern pole.
Yes.
That would, if I were in the southern hemisphere, I'd be able to see it, but the Earth was in the way because I'm in the northern hemisphere. The bulge that includes the equator on it is in the way of me seeing all the way down to there, right?
Yes.
Whereas in the northern hemisphere, if I turned around and faced north, which I'm doing right now, I can see the top, right? I can see the North Pole. Did it move for you?
Yep.
Cool. So I can see that, like in the southern hemisphere, they can see the southern point that it all comes together. In the northern hemisphere, we can see that, but that's behind our back if we turn towards the south, right? Everyone
Yes.
tracking? So now I'm going to put let's put the sun back in there, if I can get the sun to show up, and we'll see that, like, as we move through the year. Can I get the sun? Yeah. Let me get the sun back, sorry. We need some solar system objects. Boom, okay. So now there's Jupiter, there's Saturn, here's the south. I'm facing south, but as I go through the year, can't see the sun because it's 7 o'clock at night. Let me get to noon. There's the sun. All right, so here we are at 12 noon. And actually, you should always keep your stay off of daylight savings time, because the sun will be at its highest point at 1 o'clock during daylight savings time. But let's dial back to, yeah. Well, it disconnects you a little bit from nature. But let's get back to 12 noon, right? Well, I don't know why 12:10 is showing here, but see, we got the sun pretty much at its highest point in the sky, 12 noon. But right now I'm in February. So as I start moving through the year, the sun will start getting even higher above at 12 noon. See that?
I see it, yes.
So now we're on daylight savings time, annoying daylight savings time here in June. So I've moved it to 1 p.m., but that's really still 12 p.m. Look at how high the sun is. Why is it so high? Because I'm on June 17th. I'm almost at the solstice. There's June 21st. That's the highest it'll be. So as we move through the year, if I start moving through the months, I'm keeping the sun basically at noon. I can move a little slower by going day by day. You see what's happening?
Yes.
And the sun, the background stars that the sun is going through, what are those constellations called?
The zodiacal constellations.
Those are the zodiac. So because they just happen to be, or they were providentially placed, I don't know if they just happen to be there perfectly, or they're providentially placed along this ecliptic path, but it is this amazing system that someone very ancient, predating, I would argue, Egypt and Sumer and China and India and whatever ancient civilizations were in the Americas, or cultures were in the Americas, because Graham Hancock is now presenting some wonderful arguments to show, hey, that predecessor culture may have been centered right here in the Americas.
Yeah. Wow, that is really cool looking.
But see, what we're seeing here is the sun is moving through those background of stars. The background of stars is the zodiac. This is a big, long explanation to say why I'm facing south. Because in the northern hemisphere, if I want to see the zodiac most easily, I'm going to have to face towards the south. See, when I turn around, I'm going to see the North Star. I'm going to see the stars that are, if I turn back around to the north, I'm going to see the stars that are circling around the North Celestial Pole.
Right,
Those
you're
are basically
at the axis, yeah.
Yeah, those are the stars that are right above the North Pole. So if I do the same thing, well, yeah, I see this is turning throughout the year, but I'm not seeing the zodiac. I am seeing the zodiac, but they're kind of harder to see.
Way
You
off
see
the
them
edge.
down at the bottom. Yeah, so let's turn back around and face the south. That was a long explanation of why I'm facing the south, but I know you guys are into this stuff. And this relates to why are the solstices and equinoxes important in the ancient myths. So I've stopped it right here. This is a portion of the sky that's actually, here we are in January. This is noon in January. Let's bring it up to like the present date. Here we are in August, around August 15, August 16. Now let's go to the nighttime. See the sun still up? Let's move the sun. Here we are, 11 p.m. Look at what we have here, the glorious Milky Way. Can you see it?
Yes.
We're actually inside the Milky Way. That's why it appears as this big ring. We're inside of it. It's like a giant fried egg, and we're inside the fried part of the white of the egg. And so as we're spinning inside that fried egg, we're seeing the whole fried egg going around us. Flip, flip, flip. But it looks like a ring because we're in the middle of the fried egg. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
The fried egg We're in the Friday.
From inside of it, yeah. So it's
we're looking out from inside of it. So that great ring of the Milky Way. And right here, this is a very mythologically important region because this is where the sun actually passes around the winter solstice. So this has to do with the winter solstice, which is like the rebirth of the year. And in the myths, that's code for lots of other things, like Gandalf getting in touch with his higher Gandalf, you getting in touch with your essential self, you getting back in touch with your higher self. These kinds of motifs.
The death and rebirth motif is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, and I think that death and rebirth motif has to do with a lot of things that we're actually wrestling with because we get separated from who we really are. We get separated from our authentic self. That's why we have addictions, according to some very forward-thinking psychologists like Dr. Gabor Mate. I don't know if you've heard me talk about him, but when I heard him talking about that from a psychology perspective, I said, wow, that's exactly what the myths are talking about with this death and rebirth, or with these two twins, one of whom goes down to the underworld. You may recognize that pattern from Gilgamesh, but also Castor and Pollux, one of them goes down to the underworld. The hero twins in the Maya myths, they go down to the underworld. Or we have gods who go down to the underworld like Osiris. Or we have goddesses who go down to the underworld like Persephone. Or Baldur is another one who goes down to the underworld. There's another goddess, Inanna, actually from the Sumerian, goes down to the underworld and dies and comes back. I think this is talking about a lot of things, but one of them being your loss of your essential, authentic self and getting back in touch with it. But before I can really make that argument, I have to show to people, hey, all these things that we're seeing here are very important in the myths. These figures that we're looking at right now, these are the figures that you see in the myths. So right here, this is one of the zodiac constellations here. Whoops, every time I click on it, if I hit a star, it tells me all the details of that star. But can you see this? See this constellation right here? Saturn is actually, well, I've moved us forward to 2024. Saturn's not in this constellation right now. Back to 2019. Saturn's actually in this constellation right here. This is Sagittarius.
With the bow.
Yep, with the bow. I just did a video that you guys watched that has the Sagittarius and the bow. This is Capricorn. Capricorn is a goat or a sea goat. So people who are familiar with the zodiac are already probably saying, okay, Sagittarius, Capricorn. Well, I absolutely know who that figure is. Who's that figure? Who comes after Capricorn? Do you guys know? Yeah, that's Aquarius. And can you see?
Yep, it's pouring the water out. Yeah.
Pouring out some water from this large vessel right here. Right. So then if we go to, I don't know, my blog, I was saying before the break, the thunderstorm break.
The flat earther break.
Yeah. Shut down your internet break. If we go to John the Baptist and we look at how John the Baptist is depicted in paintings, I'm going to see if I can find one that really shows it. These are some of my earlier efforts. Come on, John the Baptist, where are you? There we go. This is an amazing artist from the, I want to say, early 1300s, whose name is Fra Angelico, Brother Angelico. Here we have John the Baptist. Obviously, here we have Jesus with his hands together in kind of a mudra, a hand gesture. In ancient India or in modern Hindu, they call these mudras. This hand gesture actually means I recognize the divinity in you. This is what you put your hands together when you say namaste or namaskaram. It means the divinity in me recognizes the divinity in you. Well, what's happening in this scene? The divinity in Jesus is being recognized right here when the Holy Spirit comes down like a dove. You see the Holy Spirit there? So let's look at that outline of John the Baptist. Do you see a leg that's forward in a bent and one leg that's back? Right. And an arm that's reaching out and holding a vessel and pouring water down? So then we go back to Aquarius. So John the Baptist is very often depicted with his legs kind of like this and holding up the water vessel and pouring it down. He's actually pouring it down on a fish symbol in the sky. That's the southern fish. It's called Pisces austrinus. You see that?
See it, yes.
See how it looks like a fish?
Mm-hmm.
Go back to the hand gesture. Looks like a fish.
Oh.
John the Baptist looks like Aquarius.
Yes.
The reason why you have this river back here, well, it's the Jordan River, but it's also this river that's right behind Aquarius is the Milky Way. You see any birds descending in the Milky Way? That's the constellation. Yeah, that's Cygnus. These are the two big birds of the Milky Way. This is Aquila, the eagle. It looks kind of small on your screen. It's actually really big in the night sky. It's huge, and it's visible right now. It has a very bright star. This is Altair, the star Altair. There's 3 stars in a row. Not as bright as the stars of Orion's belt, but that's Altair in the eagle, flying upwards, basically. And this is I think this is probably the dove flying downwards would be Cygnus, the swan. The dove in these paintings is usually flying downwards. This eagle, you see this in other myths. In fact, I'll show one to you a little later on, maybe, where we have a figure that's associated with this constellation, Ophiuchus, will often have an eagle right next door.
Okay.
Eagle right next door. In fact, that eagle right next door, let me go to page 400 in my most recent book, because I know you guys came up with a Snake Brothers vocabulary.
Yes.
This
you got a word to add to the Snake Bros glossary?
No, you guys already have it. This is my most recent book. It's called The Ancient Worldwide System. You guys recognize this picture?
Yes.
Shoulder rivers.
Yeah, shoulder rivers.
What god is that?
That's Enki or Ea, right?
Enki is the Sumerian, and it says right here in my book, the Babylonians call him Ea. You see what he's got right here?
Eagle. Ha!
Eagle. And he's got 2 rivers. So you might think I'm arguing that in the text here is I'm arguing that you might think it would be Aquarius, but actually I'm arguing that Aquarius figures, they do pour out water, but usually not on both sides.
Right.
What we're looking at here is probably Ophiuchus. You see this figure right here?
Yeah,
yes.
He's got
Tall
2...
central figure, 2 things on either side, and an eagle right here. So this is a super important constellation. There's a god in the Sanskrit Vedas of ancient India who has an eagle who accompanies him. The eagle's name is Garuda.
Yes, heard of Garuda.
And that's Vishnu. Vishnu is a super important. Vishnu and Shiva both actually have characteristics of Ophiuchus. One of them has a lotus flower growing out of his navel. See this lotus flower right here?
Yes.
Growing out of his navel. This is usually envisioned as, I'm going a little fast. I really have to slow down because I'm seeing so many connections. I just want to unload on all of them.
Man,
but that's
great.
Not really the best way to explain it. Ophiuchus is a central figure with a tall oblong body. He's standing right above Scorpio. He's holding, his name Ophiuchus comes from Greek. Ophis or ophites, it means serpent. And the Greek word for holding sounds like Kian. I don't speak ancient Greek, but it's Ophiuchus means holding a serpent. So he's the serpent holder. I'm trying to show it with my little mouse here. It's not the best pointer in the world.
No,
but on the left side, as we face Ophiuchus, that's usually envisioned as the tail of the serpent that he's holding. And then on the other side, we have the head of the serpent that he's holding. Okay? So this is, but this serpent that's held by Ophiuchus appears in many myths as many different things. And sometimes it's a lotus plant growing out of the belly button of Vishnu at the beginning of the world. So these are...
That's another thing, is that Enki was often referred to as a serpent as well, right?
That's right.
So yeah, and so Enki has this. He has two rivers coming out of his shoulders, right? Two shoulder rivers.
Yep.
He's got 1 foot in the Milky Way. So this is a watery figure. And
Yeah.
what's a little bit confusing is actually there are figures who have characteristics. I think Aquarius and Ophiuchus in this ancient system are like not necessarily brothers, but almost like twins, because there's figures like Dionysus, who pours out wine, has a lot of characteristics of Aquarius, but he also has characteristics of Ophiuchus. So I think those two constellations might not have been the best one to start with. People might say, oh, you're grasping for straws. Well, if I were to show you some more artwork, even from ancient times, yeah, believe me, this pattern is worldwide in the artwork. It's really clear. But the other part I'll say is finding Ophiuchus isn't super easy. So it's not like we would expect people around the world to envision this constellation the same way. And yet their ancient artwork and their ancient texts shows that they do. And right on top of Ophiuchus, yeah, I'll stop. Go ahead.
I was gonna say this may get a little off, but go back to that Sumerian picture, or I guess it was Babylonian, maybe it was a Sumerian
It's
cylinder
a
seal.
Yeah.
So the double-faced guy.
Sumerian 2300 BC, so it's in hard greenstone. Yeah, the double-faced guy. Who's that?
Yeah. Who's that?
It's Umisu. Umisu. I say it on the next page. So this is what scholars tell us that it is. Get that out of the way. Search bar. Inanna is the goddess. She's holding a branch. She's holding a branch in her outstretched hand. Is it scrolling okay with you guys on your screen?
Yeah, we see it. Yep.
Yeah. She's holding this branch in her outstretched hand. That's a very important characteristic of another constellation, constellation Virgo. She holds a spike of wheat in some depictions people might be familiar with. The sun god Shamash is carving his way through the mountain. See that?
Right. Yes.
Remember, you guys were talking about why did Gilgamesh have to go through the mountain so fast?
Yeah.
Well, because every day the sun goes under the earth, right? I don't think they really believe that, but metaphorically, you could say the sun sinks down into the western horizon, then it has to burrow through the earth and come out on the other side.
Right.
Well, if Gilgamesh is burrowing through the tunnel and the sun starts in through the tunnel and overtakes him, Gilgamesh is going to be in a world of hurt.
Right.
So he's got to get through before the sun. Well, guess what? This is in my most recent book, but Ophiuchus sometimes appears as a mountain in myths. And here's the tunnel going through the mountain. And there's actually, in the Milky Way, you can see this dark band. There's actually a pathway through the Milky Way right there. It's like a tunnel.
The other connection I see between Enki and Aquarius is the goat between his legs.
Yeah.
So if you go back to the Babylonian picture, he's got a goat there.
That's what you were gonna probably point out. I tend to go off on some tangents, and it's good that you guys bring me back. So I think there's some pretty good arguments that Enki Ea is associated with Ophiuchus and Aquarius figures. And so anyway, you were asking about Umisu, and I tackle it in my book here. Here's the god Umisu. You can see how it's spelled. Yeah. The minister or vizier of Enki. He has two faces, one pointing towards the left and one pointing towards the right. And we have other characters like the god Janus.
Janus, yes.
Yeah, for whom January is named, right?
Yeah.
Who have two faces. So these are patterns that we find all around the world. And I say it's actually probably, this is harder to see, Boötes. But Boötes is on the correct place. Eagle on this side, two-faced on this side. This is actually a little more difficult to see, but this figure right here that I was about to point out, this is Hercules.
With the club.
This is the constellation Hercules. See the club raised overhead?
Is that also Inanna holding the stick in the other picture?
I'm
getting that one wrong.
Yeah, I think Inanna is actually probably Virgo. Let me move the stars back a little bit. See this constellation right here is called Coma Berenices. It means Berenice's hair. So Virgo has this distinctive outstretched arm. And so in a lot of depictions of the Virgin Mary, you'll see an outstretched arm. It's really distinctive in...
I think I can...
I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Let me go to... it's called the Pietà. Are you guys still there?
Yeah. We're still here.
Okay, I heard a little thing. So in the Pietà of Michelangelo, well, let me just find it on... Let's just go to this very famous statue by Michelangelo. Well, let me pull it up on the full screen somehow here for your viewers. Can we get it bigger? See her arm right here?
Mm-hmm.
It's telling you that she's the Virgin Virgo. She has the outstretched arm. There's actually, if you look at pictures of Isis retrieving the casket of Osiris, the casket of Osiris. Here we go.
Okay.
Can you see that? I'm going to make it even bigger. Look at her outstretched arm. It's like extra outstretched.
Yes.
She's actually retrieving the casket that contains the god Osiris. You can see the 3 or the 4 backbones of Osiris there. That's called the Jed column.
Right.
So Isis receiving the casket of Osiris parallels the Virgin Mary receiving the body of Christ from the cross. Okay. Christ will come back in 3 days. Osiris will come back after Isis and Horus. There's a restoration.
Yes.
It's the same pattern that's going on in the stars, and I would argue it is based on, it's the same pattern that's going on in the myths around the world, and I would argue it's based on the stars. So this isn't even where the direction I was planning to go, but I'm just showing.
You were going. You tried twice to go to Hercules. Russ derailed you.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, that's
Let's go to Hercules.
So I'm just trying to show some evidence. When I say I think all the myths are based on the stars, it's even hard for people to envision what on earth are you talking about, mainly because nobody can envision the constellations anymore.
Right.
These outlines of the stars these are the outlines, as you guys know from watching that video that I made recently. These are the outlines of HA ray. But if we were to go to a different outlining system, this is the way you're going to usually see them on Wikipedia or an iPhone app or something.
It hasn't changed yet.
It's all broken up.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I see it. Yeah.
Yeah, they're all like in pieces.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't necessarily... Look, this is how they're showing...
That's the teapot.
This is Sagittarius. Yeah, and the teapot, hey, that's helpful to see the teapot. And actually, this teapot outline shows up in myths, I would argue, as a grasshopper. See how this could look like a grasshopper? This being the head?
Yeah, his leg coming up. Yes, yes.
See if I can zoom in on it real quick. Yeah. That's a grasshopper, right? Do we have any grasshoppers
Mr. Miyagi.
Yeah. Well, do you have any plagues of locusts anywhere?
Yeah.
That's a plague of locusts. This is where the plague of locusts, I would argue, come from. But this really doesn't look like the constellation Sagittarius. Let's go back to the HA ray outline.
How did you get those? Is that something you downloaded, or is it included?
This is in Stellarium. So Stellarium is an open source app.
Right,
so
I have it.
If you have Stellarium, you have to go into the control panel right here. It's different on different versions. This is Stellarium version 0.18.3, but Star Lore is in that control panel. You go over to Star Lore, and you can
just select the one you want. Okay.
You get HA ray. So now I'm back to HA ray. Look at this outline of Sagittarius right here.
That's way better.
Yeah.
Well, it's way better if you're trying to find it in the sky. and it's way better if you're trying to find it in the myths, because in that this is a picture of the goddess Artemis from a vase in AD 470 BC.
Right.
This is 470 BC. This is a ancient Greek vase, incredibly sophisticated and beautiful artwork using the red figure technique. And there is the constellation Sagittarius with the HA ray outline. Can you see how, when I saw this vase artwork, because I was already familiar with the HA ray outlines, and because I was already studying the connections, I was already looking for the connections between the stars and the myths, you can see very clearly, I would argue, that this ancient artist knows that there's a connection between the goddess Artemis and the constellation. She's holding her bow even at this level right here.
Yeah. Yep.
It's the same level. She's even got the skirt that's almost the same length.
Yes.
And the feet, look, it even has the foot kind of it's 3D, it comes over the border, and it's there. And
it's angled that way, yeah.
And by the way, she's slaying Actaeon, who's Scorpio. Look at the angle of his body. But this other thing I was showing is she has this, the artist has put, I think it's a quiver. She got a tassel on this quiver. It matches up with this. This is a distinctive feature of the constellation that shows up in different myths in different ways. So I think it's pretty hard to argue that the ancient artist here of this famous vase that you can see in the Museum of Fine Art in Boston is a famous vase, but you'd have a hard time seeing those connections with the outlines that I just showed you. The non-HA ray outline is almost like they're trying to steer you away from seeing that connection, right?
Obfuscation, yeah.
And I would even say, look, HA ray, by the way, for people who haven't watched the video, the spoiler alert, if you're scratching your head going, who is H.A. Ray? He and his wife, Margaret Ray, created
Curious George.
Curious George. So about 10 years after the first Curious George book came out, first Curious George book was published in 1941. In 1952, H.A. Ray published this book, The Stars, A New Way to See Them. But I would say, I don't know if he knew it or not. He either knew it or he got it. He got the message from the realm of the gods. He downloaded some ancient knowledge, or, you know, he saw it the same way they saw it. This is the ancient way of seeing it as well. Well, if he published that in 1952, how come we're still using these terrible outlines unless someone doesn't want you to see this? Maybe that's maybe that's why. I don't know. We'll leave that to another conversation. But see the connection.
Talk about that.
Yeah, right. You got to come to CPAC for the secret conversations. So anyway, I'll stop sharing and just, because I could just talk and talk and talk. Let me stop sharing my screen so we can interact some more and say, what kind of conversation does that trigger? Does that make it clear what I'm trying to say when I say I think all the myths are based on the stars?
Yes, that was an excellent exposition of what you're talking about. So one thing I wanted to ask you before we get away from all the stars quite yet, you have a couple, and I'm drawing a blank on them, but you have a couple where you say this central figure shows up across all these different systems, and I can't remember if
Ophiuchus.
Yeah, is it Ophiuchus or Hercules?
Well,
maybe?
Ophiuchus and Hercules are extremely important. The zodiac constellations are extremely important. Virtually all the constellations show up here or there in the myths, but the ones that are repeated the most often, Ophiuchus is one of the most important, and Hercules is one of the most important, and Sagittarius is one of the most important. All the zodiac constellations are very important, but Sagittarius and Scorpio are very important because they're near the brightest part of the Milky Way. And all these figures kind of have roles or connections within the system that they symbolize certain things. And so I'll let you get to your question, but it's kind of like all the constellations are actors, and male and female actors. And in fact, each constellation plays male roles and female roles in different myths. It's not like Hercules is always male. or Sagittarius is always female. We just saw a goddess who's Sagittarius, but actually her twin brother, Apollo, who also carries a bow, I believe is associated with the same constellation, which makes sense because they're twins, right? And they both use bows and arrows. So Sagittarius can be both male and female, but it's like there's a limited number of actors on this stage. The authors of Hamlet's Mill say the actors on the heavenly stage are very few. So you're going to see them in many, many roles on these myths. Well, there's certain actors, there's certain constellations that seem to get the lead role an awful lot. It's like Brad Pitt is in an awful lot of movies, right? He's in that one about the Big Short. He's also in the Iliad, or
in Fight Club,
the Trojan War, and in Fight Club. And it's like, man, how many roles does this actor get? Well, it's like Ophiuchus shows up over and over, and Sagittarius shows up over and over, and they'll be in totally different roles. Like you'll be like, wait, is that Brad Pitt with a beard, or is that Brad Pitt in True Romance? That was Brad Pitt, really, on the couch? That was him? Yeah, it's the same one. After you start to like get familiar with them, then you'll be like, wait a minute, that's Ophiuchus again. Or that god is exhibiting characteristics that I've seen with Ophiuchus. Let's see if there's other clues. Aha.
Right.
That seems to be a Ophiuchus element right there. So I don't know if that answered your question, or I was just trying to.
No, that was great.
So
that's great.
Do the myths, in terms of their connection to the stars, do the actual physical appearance, the properties of whatever's going on in that part of the sky also play a role in these characters that are made up that have to do with like earthly things or whatever? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Good, very good question. So you're getting into what's it doing. So do you think we've proven enough, or do you want to see, I mean, I can come back to that question and answer it, or do you want to see show any more evidence that this is around the world, or just, maybe I'll just answer that. I can tell by your faces. I just answer that question.
No, whatever you want to do.
I want both.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
is my answer to that.
Yeah.
Yes and yes.
How long have we been going? How long do you guys want to go? All right. Let me share my screen.
We're coming up on, we're about an hour and a half, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Right on. So let me share my screen and show you the Zodiac Wheel to begin to answer that question. Right. So we saw, can you guys see the Zodiac Wheel?
We see it.
Yeah. So we saw the actual movement of the sky throughout the year. The Zodiac Wheel is like a short for this, right? If we go back to noon, I'm going to answer your question, Kyle. It's a deep question, so it requires a little bit of setup to answer. But if we move this, if we move through the year, you see how the sun, you guys watching it going through, it is cool. Yes. And it's like, don't lean over too much or you might fall down to the South Pole. Right? I mean, lift up. Here, you see the South Pole down there? It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
See the sun is going around, and look, you can see the planets like zipping around.
Right, and the moon zipping past, and all
that's
the
the moon. Each month, it's making us. It's moving through all the constellations in a month.
Yeah.
And Mercury, see Mercury taking a turn. Mercury never gets too far from the sun because
the closest planet.
It's the closest planet. So it's moving through all the constellations. It's getting higher. Well, what it's doing is it's moving through these are zodiac constellations. I'll stop it for a second. Did it stop on your end?
That's right. Yep.
It's in what? Right there. That's Taurus. Taurus the bull. So near the top, we're near the top. Now it's moving out of Taurus. It's above Orion right now. You see Orion down below there?
Orion, yeah. It's getting into.
It's actually. Whoops! I changed the time. My mistake. It's getting into
he's reaching
Gemini.
Up to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's getting into Gemini. Yeah.
So it's actually cresting at the top of its arc, and it's getting ready to go back down. In between, see Gemini. Now we're moving into Cancer, the crab, and heading down into Leo, the lion. Right. And now it's heading down towards Virgo, the Virgin, with her outstretched arm, you see there?
Yep.
And now it's going into the scales of Libra,
Libra, and then we get to Scorpio.
Now it's in Scorpio, and it's getting towards the bottom of its turn. And wait a minute. See what it's
now
doing right there?
Ophiuchus's knee, or however
Yeah.
you
It's
say it.
actually crossing through Ophiuchus. Now, have you guys ever, when you're meeting someone and you say, "What's your sign?"
Never heard somebody say Ophiuchus.
My sign is Ophiuchus's knee.
Ophiuchus is actually sometimes called the 13th zodiac because it's like the sun actually does pass through it, but it's excluded from the 12 zodiac signs. So it's in the zodiac and yet outside the zodiac at the same time. And this is starting to answer your question, Kyle. That is a characteristic of Ophiuchus. Ophiuchus is in the world, but also detached from the world. Have you maybe ever heard that verse anywhere before?
Say it again.
Be in the world, but not of the world. To be.
Yes. That's like often spoken in the Christian tradition.
That's a Bible verse.
Yeah.
Or it's derived from biblical texts, but it's also Buddha. Buddha is Ophiuchus symbol. Jesus is an Ophiuchus symbol, I would argue. Moses is an Ophiuchus symbol with his rod that stretches out into the Milky Way, which is the Red Sea that he crosses. But these figures that are detached from the world, like the Buddha, so the Buddha learns to become detached. He meditates, he's detached. Ophiuchus is part of the zodiac, but detached from the zodiac. That's one reason why it's such an important figure.
So that's interesting. So he's holding the serpent. The serpent is the symbol of knowledge, and he's sort of above.
But he's in both worlds.
Yeah,
both worlds. And you guys are the brothers.
His feet on the ground and his head in the sky.
So you guys should be identifying with Ophiuchus.
Yeah,
he's got his foot in the river of the galaxy.
Yeah,
1 foot in the Milky Way and 1 foot on dry ground. There's actually an angel in Revelation. There's an angel in Revelation who has 1 foot in the ocean and 1 foot on dry land. It actually says that directly in the text. That angel is an Ophiuchus figure. And in fact, if we were to go back to,
that's also a Celtic, like, time between times, place between place, right? When you got 1 foot in the water and 1 foot on land, or it's dusk or dawn, the time between times. You're in both places.
These are talking about things that we need in order to get reconnected with our higher self. You have to detach from your mind is not you. Your mind is part of you that's been created over time in order to deal with the world. But your mind can get in the way. Can your mind play tricks on you? Yeah. Can your mind run away with you? Do we have these expressions? Yeah, my imagination ran away with me. Like you start, let's say I don't know if you guys played basketball, football, baseball, but let's say you happen to have it's your senior year. It's your last game of the last day of the season of your senior year, and you're the basketball star, and your team is down by 2 points, and you have the basketball with 2 seconds to go, and you're behind the 3-point line, and you're about to make the shot. What should you do? Think about it very carefully about how important this shot is.
No.
This is the very last shot of the year, and how embarrassed you'll be if you miss this shot, and how you really like the cheerleader in the front row and she's looking right at you and you're about to take the shot. Should you think of all those things before you take the shot?
No, just freaking throw the ball.
Absolutely not. You better not, or you won't even hit the backboard.
That's right.
You might not even hit the side of the gym. Because your mind, we've got to be able to quiet our mind in order to get in touch with a higher part of ourself that we need for certain, like fully realizing our full potential and capability. That's what Ophiuchus figures is part of this. So Kyle asked this very insightful question of, does the constellation relate to the code? It's like whoever put this code together, the constellations, where they are in that circle relates to where things of our own life. So I was talking about it. Yeah. I was talking about an angel. And this is, I'm showing an Ophiuchus figure. This is the angel, the archangel Michael. You see what he's holding in his hands?
Scales.
Scales. See what this Archangel Michael's holding in the hands there?
Oh, yeah, scales.
Scales or balances. How about this one? There's a different Archangel Michael. They're all slaying the dragon. This is out of Revelation 12, where the Archangel Michael finally defeats the dragon.
Serpent.
Scales in one hand. In this hand, scales. In this hand, spear. So if I could somehow get back to Stellarium. Oops, sharing my screen. Here's Ophiuchus. This is a spear in this hand right here. I don't know if you're seeing it. He's got a scorpion right under his feet, right?
Right, and there's...
That's the dragon. See the scales right here?
Scales, yeah.
So that's pretty good evidence
Libra.
that angel, that angel is lined up with Ophiuchus, just like the other angel in the Revelation who has 1 foot in the water, 1 foot on land. So this isn't just with artwork, it's also the texts themselves. Some people might say, well, you can't argue that all the myths are based on the stars if you're just showing me artwork. That could just mean that the artists are basing their artwork on the stars. Well, yeah, they are, but the text...
Many of those artists were initiated into the mysteries
into
as
the
well.
Mysteries, yeah.
Somehow the system is passed down through the centuries in the artwork.
The Watcher is pointing out that Ophiuchus is also, he's got a staff and a serpent, and that's the caduceus.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, so Asclepius, who's the god of healing, is associated also with a staff and a serpent. That's why we have the medical symbol with the two serpents on it. Yes. Asclepius was such a good doctor that Zeus finally had to kill him with a thunderbolt because no mortals were dying. The mortals were gonna never die, and the gods were like, look, this is problematic. We got to stop Asclepius. Yeah. So Zeus finally said, okay, I really don't want to do this, but I'll have to defeat him with a thunderbolt. You see Hercules right here? Mm-hmm. Just look at that outline of Hercules.
Yeah.
Asclepius is Ophiuchus with a serpent and a staff. Excellent insight by the Watcher. So we could connect this line instead of this crooked tail. It could just be a line straight down into the dragon as a spear, just like we saw in some of those pictures. Figures who carry a spear are often Ophiuchus characters in myth, like the goddess Athena, who springs from the forehead of her father Zeus. She carries a spear and she wears a helmet. She's a Ophiuchus figure. Look at the outline of Hercules. Hercules is usually the strongest figure in any myth system. So let me just zip up quickly to, here's the constellation Hercules. Everyone can see that. Mm-hmm. See Hercules? Yep. Right in front of Hercules is this little crown-shaped constellation that's called the Northern Crown. Can you see that?
Yeah, it's a little U-shape there.
Yeah, that's a Northern Crown. It's called Corona Borealis, the Northern Crown. Hercules could actually be envisioned as grasping the Northern Crown. If you just imagine one more line there. This is not H.A. Ray's line. I put that in, right? But this is the outline of Hercules that H.A. Ray suggests. See how he's grasping the Northern Crown, or could be imagined as grasping the Northern Crown? Look at these figures of Hercules on ancient vases. He's got one weapon over his head. He's got a square, his head is kind of square shaped. Right. First of all, he has a full beard, right? But he also wears a dead lion skin over his head to make his head even more square. Let's go back to the constellation Hercules. The stars in the sky have a distinctive square shaped head. Am I right?
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah, it's great.
He's brandishing a weapon over his head. It's kind of hard to see on this one on the left because of the curve of the pot.
But no, now that I'm thinking about it, you're right. Like almost every depiction of Hercules, he's got one arm back with something, sword, club, something. That's right. Stab, smash, break. Yeah.
And his other arm is reaching forward, just like Hercules in the sky, one arm reaching forward. And remember, sometimes that arm could be grasping an arc-shaped crown. So now let's go to these Hercules figures and see if I can make it big.
So he's grabbing somebody else's head
crest.
Or their... Yeah.
See that? This is the helmet of the guy he's fighting. That's his crest, like the Greek crest. Here he's fighting the queen of the Amazons, Hippolyta or Hippolyta. She has a crest He's actually touching her shoulder instead of grasping the crest. So in this one, he's not grasping the crest, but often he's grasping
head-related stuff.
Look at that. Yeah, that's right. Because, see that? Wait, let me get over here.
Yes, that's great.
You see that hand right there?
Right, yeah.
He's grasping this crest. And even in this, let me zoom back in. Oh my. Apologies to those listening. Here, look at Hercules. He's wrestling with Triton. Triton is a sea god or a river god who can turn into different shapes. He's got kind of a humped serpent-like figure in the center. I would argue he's Ophiuchus figure, but look at the outline of Hercules or Heracles. See the deep knee bend? Mm-hmm. You can't quite see his other leg, but it's in that position. It's obscured by the Triton that he's wrestling. You see how that fits exactly with that? And in this one, Triton is wearing a crown. That's the northern crown there. And anyway, there's lots of examples of this,
so the basic idea though, so the basic idea we're seeing here is that Hercules in the constellation he's got what's called an action pose.
Yeah.
You know, it looks like he's running forward. He's got one arm. It's an action pose, like you would think. Like, so I did I drew comics for a while.
Okay,
you know, and you got these different poses, and when people are standing and talking, they're not, they're still. Everything is very straight and sort of symmetrical. But in action poses, you often have asymmetrical positions, like one leg's bent one way, the other leg's bent the other way, and one arm's back and the other one's forward. Those are action poses. And so all these depictions of Hercules, even if they're not exactly the same, they're all action poses. So I see what you're getting at.
I love it that you have that experience, because clearly you've been partly initiated into this ancient system.
Oh, yeah.
But without being told that so I'm not sure that all those artists knew that what they were depicting was related to the stars. It could be that just in their art training, they were taught, well, the action poses that you can use for the Virgin Mary would include this, this, and this.
Yeah.
And the action poses for this angel would include this, this, and this.
Yes.
And I'm not sure that they were necessarily told the system. The system may have been remembered by some people and preserved in the secret traditions, or it may have just, I don't know. All I know is for sure the evidence that I'm showing you. And here's Zeus. Do you recognize the action pose?
Yes. Is he holding a Vajra? Is that
yes.
the Indian? Yeah.
Very educated of you to ask that question. So that's a thunderbolt weapon, which in Sanskrit is called the Vajra and is wielded by Indra, among others. But Indra is associated, he rides on an elephant. Indra does. I would argue, well, I do argue in my most recent book, The Ancient Worldwide System, that Indra, who's riding on an elephant, is the constellation Hercules, who's riding on Ophiuchus. Look at this Vajra or thunderbolt weapon. So the club of Hercules, so the constellation, it's a little confusing that it's called Hercules. That doesn't happen with every myth figure.
Right.
Hercules happens to also be Heracles. The hero Heracles is associated with the constellation Hercules, but let that confuse you. The constellation Hercules can play a huge number of other figures, including Zeus. So Hercules is a Zeus-like figure. In fact, Zeus is his father. Well, Zeus is also associated with Hercules. In fact, in most myth systems, whoever has the strongest weapon is usually associated with the constellation Hercules. So in the Norse myths, who do you think would be associated with the constellation Hercules?
Thor.
Thor. Yeah. That's right. And he wields a thunderbolt type hammer. Right. And he has characteristics that are like Zeus and like Hercules. He's got a quick temper, but he's pretty jovial kind of person, actually. He likes a good feast. He'll drink a lot of ale.
Yeah, well, likes to party.
The word jovial, right. He likes to party. Then he becomes Fat Thor, right?
Yeah.
in the Avengers. It's like, I just want to play Fortnite. But he's jovial.
Yes.
He's jovial. Well, the word jovial obviously comes from the name
Jovian. Yeah.
Jove. Jove is Jupiter, Zeus Pater. Well, we know this is Zeus. There's no way to deny that this is Zeus, because the ancient artist actually put a little caption there to tell us that is Zeus. And he's in the exact posture of Hercules. Well, but there's other textual clues that Zeus is associated with this constellation, like in the Odyssey or in the Iliad, when the gods approach Zeus and ask him for a favor, whenever he assents, whenever he gives his approval, he will nod his head. He will gravely nod his head. Well, the figure of Zeus, of Hercules, actually looks like he's kind of nodding his head a little bit forward in the sky, I would argue. Back to my pictures. So we can pretty much agree that this is clearly a Hercules figure, and he's actually fighting an Ophiuchus figure. See the serpents there?
Yes.
That's Typhon. But now let's jump across the Pacific, because this is, I think, even more amazing. I've got on the bottom a Maya codex. This is the oldest known surviving Maya codex. Why is it the oldest known Maya codex? Because when the literalist Christian conquistador colonialist conquerors came over to the Americas, they promptly gathered together all the sacred texts and made a huge bonfire and destroyed all this ancient knowledge and ancient wisdom that could have helped us understand this even more. So there's very few. The reason I'm showing so much Greek,
there's a lot of that.
There's a lot of
Maya stuff.
There's not very much Maya stuff. There's not even very much Norse stuff, really. A lot of it didn't survive for one reason or another. But here's the most ancient surviving codex. It's called the Dresden Codex because one of the conquistadors sent it back to the King of Spain, and then he gave it as a present to one of the princes of Germany or something, and it ended up in Dresden, where it still is to this day. But any similarities there with the Zeus figure?
Yes. Yeah, I see the same action pose there. Yep.
Exact same. Of course, it's mirror imaged, but
and he's got a very square head. Yeah, he does have a square head.
Square hat even, right?
Yeah.
A square hat. And that's actually significant because if you look across the Pacific, the figure of Tiki, who's actually a thunder type god, and he usually has his tongue out, but he's usually wearing a very square headdress or hat. Okay. And so Tiki or Tiki, if you're from New Zealand, you actually pronounce it Tiki. Usually in the United States, we probably grew up talking about, Tiki bar or Tiki statue.
And that Mayan one is the weapon in the forehand. Is that?
So
that's the lightning bolt out there. I see the forked end.
But it's pretty clear parallels to they're even depicting the lightning bolt the same way. And yet this Greek artwork is from really probably at least 1,500 years prior to the Maya codex. This codex is thought to have been created around the year we call 1200 AD or 80.
Right, but it's pretty obvious. It's pretty clear now. At least there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the Maya got most of their stuff from the Olmecs, which were they were as old as the Greeks, if not older. So.
So all these I think these ancient traditions are passed down. It's not. We don't even have to say, well, this culture got it from that culture. They could have all remembered it in different ways.
Well, it seems like the Maya were direct inheritors of Olmec traditions because the Olmecs are much older. I see what you're saying. Yes,
for sure. The Olmecs are very ancient and mysterious, and I think I put here's from La Venta. We've got the serpent there for you with the famous
handbag,
which is what?
Possibly a sunset.
Possibly a sunset. Yeah, I listened to your discussion with Martin Sweatman, which was extremely interesting, where you were talking about the Pillar 43, which actually includes, there we go.
Yep, there it is.
Three of those, and then here we have it across the ocean. For those not familiar, now we're talking faster.
If anybody listening is not familiar with what we're talking about, catch up.
And if you're only listening, I'm showing things and people are getting frustrated. So the Pillar 43 from Göbekli Tepe is obviously in modern day Turkey, near the border with Syria. Monument 19 or Stela 19 from La Venta is an Olmec carving, the oldest known Olmec carving, I believe.
Yeah.
According to archaeologists. And it's from modern day region of southern Mexico, La Venta. You can find it by just doing a search. But we have a very similar handbag And I would argue you guys have already seen the constellation hints of what this would be when I was showing you an angel holding Libra, right?
Okay,
Let's
see.
go to Mesopotamia. So here, for those listening, if you're able to go watch the YouTube, this would be helpful to watch the YouTube. But here we are in Mesopotamian artwork of a figure usually identified as one of the Apkallu of ancient Mesopotamia. Yeah, and he's holding kind of a pine cone shaped object or egg shaped object in an upward raised hand, and a satchel or bucket or handbag in a downward facing arm, right? And here's another Apkallu. This one has the head of a eagle or bird of prey. Same thing in his upraised hand, pine cone shaped, downward arm, satchel or bucket or handbag in the downward arm, wings on the back, right?
Yeah, and the legs always make me think that there's some kind of construct, or maybe they're wearing armor.
So they're wearing a long armor-like garment. That's actually important for what I'm about to show you. Let me maximize the screen. Now what are we looking at, guys?
Ophiuchus. Yeah, Ophiuchus and
yeah.
Oh, okay, the Buddha. I see. Yeah.
So on the left is Ophiuchus. So let's just look at the constellations for a minute. There's Ophiuchus above the constellation Hercules.
Mm-hmm.
On the right, we've got a figure of the Buddha. This is a pretty ancient carving from the 1st or 2nd century AD. That's pretty ancient. The Buddha, for those who think the Buddha walked the earth as a literal person, they think it was about 500 BC, or 5th century BC, I should say, which is really 400s, like from 499 to 400. But behind the Buddha, we have a figure who's known as Vajrapani, Vajra in hand. You guys, not everybody looks at a thunderbolt and says, "Oh, is that a Vajra?" But Russ did.
Yeah.
There's actually a figure who's known as Vajrapani. Does he look like any figures that you saw earlier?
Yeah.
Hercules looking.
Yeah, right.
He's
more 3D than the Hercules constellation, but yes, I see the same pose. Yeah.
Is he holding a thunderbolt weapon over his head like a Vajra? Look at Hercules. I mean, behind and above the Buddha to protect him from harm while he's meditating, we have Vajrapani.
Oh, he's not going to bonk him on the head with that thing?
No, he's protecting him from all the
the
demons that want to distract him while he's meditating.
Okay.
So that he can become enlightened and connect with his essential self, his authentic self. But what's the Buddha holding in his upraised hand?
Looks like an egg or something.
An egg or something.
The end of a serpent. Is it a serpent head? I can't tell.
Well, let's go back. What's our Apkallu holding in his upraised hand?
A pine cone. A pine cone.
A pine cone or a pineal gland or an egg or something. Yeah. Let's go back to the constellation Ophiuchus. Like I argue that that the Buddha is an Ophiuchus figure. Well, this statue from the 1st or the 2nd century AD with a upraised hand with an egg in it. See the serpent head? And a Vajrapani is a pretty strong argument. Now, let's go back to our Apkallu. He's got an upraised hand with an egg in it. I'm going to argue that he's an Ophiuchus figure. On this side of the figure, we have wings. You see, these are the wings. Mm-hmm. On this side of the figure, in the upraised hand, we have an egg-shaped or some kind of object that's representing what this is in the sky, the serpent head.
So if you just connect
on the downside, you would have Libra.
Yeah. On the downward hand, we have a bucket-shaped object. On the downward hand of the angel, we have a scales of Libra. It's the same constellation.
Yes. Right. So you just redraw those lines on your Ophiuchus picture. If we redraw the lines, the one arm comes straight out from the shoulder holding the object, and the other one is going down.
Precisely. I mean, if we go to the night sky so that I can't be accused of manipulating anything. Here we have Ophiuchus.
Yes.
On one side, we have wings. Sometimes Ophiuchus figures are winged figures. In fact, if we went back to that picture of Zeus fighting Typhon, you would see that Typhon, who has a bunch of serpents, also has wings. So on one side of the Apkallu, in that Mesopotamian artwork from Nineveh, we have the wings. On the other side, we have an upraised hand with a small object and a downward hand with a bucket. You see the bucket right there is Libra.
Yes. Wow.
That's the bucket figure, I would argue, right there. Does that mean that I am countering Martin Sweatman's argument that it could be sunrises? No. Does the sun go through Libra? Yes. I try not to comment or criticize other people's work at all. I'm just excited to be trying to express what I'm seeing here. It does fit together with what other people are doing. You know, I'm not sure.
I think Martin Sweatman's primary argument is that those images are celestial related. And
celestial related. So if they're sunrises, he wants to say that they could be also sunrises. I'm not going to become enemies with him. That would be ridiculous. We're both on the same side here. We're saying
that's right. Yeah.
This ancient system was probably existing at Göbekli Tepe too, which was extremely ancient. So
I'm buying it.
Yeah, so
I'm buying all of it.
So that's what I think is going on, and I think it relates to our present moment. It's talking about things that we really need, and so all these ancient scriptures are talking to us in this language, but if we're trying to listen to them as if they're speaking a different language, like it's all literal, you might get a different message. You know what I mean? If someone tells you, oh, well, what that means is this, I would say we want to go back and listen to them in the language that they're speaking, which is this celestial metaphor language. And then you'll get some really amazing, I think, messages from what they're telling you.
Right.
And I think
the amazing thing to me is that so many messages exist, like overlaid upon one another in all of this. So there's like this connection that you're pointing to is fascinating, and then the fact that the actual things happening within these constellations due to our perspective of the universe, the sun passing through them, the planets passing through them, the fact that is also connected is mind-blowing. But it also suggests that whoever came up with this, like you had said in the very beginning of our conversation, it's like they were masters of human psychology. They also had to be master astronomers. They had to have observed these motions in the heavens long enough and to know that these things would be happening over top of the backdrop of constellations, and how that affects us or what time of year that might be. It's just
a great segue and insight. I mean, super excellent insight, Kyle, because I wanted to bring in pyramids since that's what you guys say your show's about, right?
Yes.
So
pyramids.
Yeah. But you're absolutely right. I mean, and you expressed it in a beautiful way. Like they had to be able to observe the stars for a long time to understand, because they incorporate into these myths the motion of precession. And the motion of precession takes really thousands of years to displace the background of stars. It takes 72 years for you to even notice that the sun or a star is 1 degree delayed from where it was on that day 72 years ago. Now, that means if you start as a 5-year-old and observe the stars for 72 years, you might, when you're 77 years old, notice 1 degree. But there's not too many people who are doing that. So this is obviously like a multi-generational project to even figure all this out.
Yeah.
And it had to be all figured out well before they incorporated it in the myths.
Yes.
And it's already in the myths in the earliest texts that we have, like the Gilgamesh epic that you guys obviously love because you were talking about it so passionately, is the oldest long narrative text that we have at this point. And it's already got
all this
system going in it. It's going strong in the Gilgamesh epic. And the Osiris myths of ancient Egypt incorporate processional imagery in them. I'm not the first person to argue that. Hamlet's Mill argued that, and Jane Sellers in her book, Death of Gods in Ancient Egypt, argued that, and she kind of clarified it even further. It was helpful to me, her arguments. They already had precession figured out before they're doing the Osiris myth, apparently. Well, how does that relate? And they're also slinging around giant stones into giant monuments that are lasting for thousands of years, that are aligned beautifully with things like solstices or north, south, east, west.
Yeah.
And as many people have pointed out before me as well, the size of the Great Pyramid is related to the size of the Earth, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's
By
a
a processional
proportion.
number.
That's the key part, because
Yeah.
if I just said it's related to the size of the Earth,
Yeah.
some skeptical person who's thinking would say, well, wait a minute, my house is related to the size of the Earth too.
Yeah.
You just have to find the right,
Find the right number, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's gonna be some weird number, but it's related. Well, if the pyramid is related to the size of the Earth by a factor of 43,200, which it is, like to an amazing degree of precision, then whoever built that pyramid that relates to the size of the Earth by a number 432, which relates to the constant of precession. Constant of precession is 1 degree every 72 years. So from that we go to 108, which is 72 plus 36, and 108 shows up in some of the most ancient myths of the world, like the Agni fire ceremony that's still celebrated by building in India today. It's like the oldest ritual or rite that's continuous. They build a brick furnace, which traditionally has 108,000 bricks.
1,000 bricks.
108 or 10,800. It doesn't, I mean, the number of zeros.
1080. Yeah. 1080.
Yeah.
The number of moves in the Tai Chi long form is 108 traditionally. There's lots of 108s around the world. Are you guys seeing?
And that's why you do it at sunrise.
Yes, you got to do your Tai Chi at sunrise.
That's
to
right.
reconnect with your higher self.
Now I finally understand all the imagery.
Russ, have you ever done Tai Chi? Because I'm not sure what you were doing there. No, I'm just kidding.
I haven't. I'm just imagining the pictures, and there's always the sunrise behind them. You just see the silhouette, and now I'm like, now I get it.
I'm just messing with you. But so if they're able to do the pyramid, I mean, that pyramid with these giant blocks of granite, they already had to know the precessional number before they put together the dimensions of that thing.
That's right.
I mean, it's mind-boggling. It really is staggering to see all this stuff, and then to see those numbers repeating in myths around the world, even in the number of, if you count up the number of berserkers at Ragnarok. You know what happens if you die in battle in the Norse myths? You get to go where?
You go to Valhalla, right?
Yeah.
Valhalla, right?
Yeah.
And what do you do when you're in Valhalla?
You feast.
Drink beer with your buddies.
And you sing
forever.
songs about kicking ass.
You guys got half of it right. What do you do all day? All day they actually fight.
Oh, they
All
fight.
day
They
long.
fight, yeah, and all
right.
night they party. That's right.
It's like I see you're wearing a tap out shirt. It's like they roll. How hard is it to roll for 6 minutes straight? That'd be pretty strenuous, right?
Yeah, I think
It's
so.
like they're rolling for like 12 hours straight, and
Yeah.
after they cut each other up, then they get healed. They put their heads back on each other, and they're like, "Oh, I cut your head off here. Let me put it back
Yeah.
on." And then they like march off to Valhalla and drink beer all night.
Yeah.
Because the reason they have to fight all day long is they're training, as I think you just said, Kyle, for Ragnarok. They got to be in top shape for Ragnarok. Well, when they march out of Valhalla, there's a poetic verse in the Poetic Edda that explains exactly how many march out of Valhalla. Let me see if I can, so I don't quote it wrong. Let me go back to sharing. Were you guys looking at me a second ago?
Yeah, we were.
Yeah,
Or
we
I
can
was
see
talking?
you.
Okay,
Now we're
right.
looking at ourselves.
Now we're looking at us. Yeah.
Okay, great. Now are you looking at the am I sharing? Am I sharing? Okay. So let me go to walk abreast.
I know what you're talking about, though. I've noticed in the Norse myths and stuff that there's a lot of very specific numbers, and all of them are
Is it
processional.
72?
Yeah, so this is actually a blog post I wrote back in 2012. It's from the Hobbit. 5 feet high the door, and 3 may walk abreast. Can you guys see that on your screen?
Yes. Yep, we see it.
So Tolkien was a scholar of Norse mythology and Beowulf. So in the Elder Edda, Elder Edda, it talks about Valhalla has 500 doors and 40. 500 doors and 40 there are, I ween. This is an older translation. In Valhalla's walls, 800 fighters through one door fair. So 800 can go through abreast. Well, that makes 800 times 540, 432,000. It's like the same as the Great Pyramid. So this is around the world. You cannot argue that the myths are based on this ancient worldwide system.
Yeah.
So, maybe that's a good place to, my family's probably like, when are we going to eat dinner?
Yeah.
There was a thunderstorm in Texas, you see.
Yeah.
So we had to push it back by an hour. But is there other stuff that you guys wanted to cover?
No, man, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. We already talked about Contact at the Cabin 2020, so just want to reiterate to everybody again, what you just heard is just a tiny example of what is going to be happening nonstop
for 4 days.
For 4 days. All of us will be doing this, and we'll be discussing all these things and showing each other pictures and blowing
Hopefully not a thunderstorm.
Yeah.
That's not what we're hoping for 4 days nonstop.
No, just the conversation, the thunderstorm part. That might happen. Well, yeah, a good 30-minute long lightning storm over the desert would be awesome. If it just blew through and then kept going.
That would be awesome, as long as it didn't harm anybody. Actually, when I was in Texas, when I was at Fort Hood, I saw a lightning strike. I was on the top of my Bradley. Actually, at the time, I was an infantry company commander with a Bradley fighting vehicle, and I was getting down. I was climbing down from my Bradley at Fort Hood, and a lightning bolt hit like 200 yards away, or maybe like 100 yards away. And I could see the smoke come up from the ground. And you can bet I got off of that Bradley.
Yeah, I got to get off this giant metal thing.
30-ton metal box. So, but anyway, so Contact at the Cabin. That's contactatthecabin.com to see what spots are still available and sign up for. And if you want to do the CPAC Conference on Precession and Ancient Knowledge, where Robert Schock will be there, and there's lots of other speakers. Christopher Dunn. You guys interviewed Christopher Dunn? Pyramids and Precision.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
We haven't interviewed him yet, but we are big fans of his work. Yes.
Yeah. So he's going to be there at CPAC, Conference on Precession and Ancient Knowledge, and so that's cpaconline.com to sign up for that one. And if you use Mathisen there's a little window when you're signing up that says discount code. If you put Mathisen as discount code, then you get $50 off that 3-day conference. So we got two exciting things coming up.
Yeah.
That I just wanted to spread to a wide audience as possible. So really appreciate you guys having me too.
Oh man, this has been great. So tell everybody where they can find your work, what the names of your books are, where they're available. Get all that information. Are you on Twitter? What's the deal?
Right on. So starmythworld.com, Star Myths of the World, is my most up-to-date and recent. I've had a few different websites over the years that
everyone has.
Kind of let them go into museum mode, but I always try and have a link that says, for the latest stuff, go to starmythworld.com. And that has videos. I think my YouTube channel now has over 110 videos on it. My blog.
How do they look that up? What's the name of your channel?
Mathisen Corollary, I think, or David W. Mathisen, I forget. If you just type in Mathisen and stars, or if you go to, basically the main hub is go to starmythworld.com, because then there's a link on the menu that's video, and then you'll get a bunch of videos. And if you just go to YouTube from that video, then you get to my channel. It's got blog, 1,000, almost 1,200 blog posts now.
Nice.
That's all free, obviously. It's got my books. I've got 9 books out now. The most recent one is actually a rewrite of Star Myths of the World Volume 1. because by the time I got finished with volume 4, I had to go back and rewrite volume 1 with the things that I discovered.
Dedication, man.
Yeah, so volume 1 is now called The Ancient Worldwide System, aka Star Myths of the World, volume 1. Volume 2 is all Greek myths. Volume 3 is Star Myths of the Bible. Volume 4 is Norse myths. And then there's some other books that aren't part of that series, but all those books with some sample content are on that same website, starmythworld.com. It's got links to my Twitter, which is, I think, David W. Mathisen or David Mathisen, and I'm on Facebook. But really, Star Myths of the World is probably your place to start, and then, or if you like to follow by Facebook or Twitter, go there and look me up.
All right, great.
Yeah.
Subscribe to the YouTube channel.
Yeah, subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's right. Click the subscribe buttons.
and support the Snake Brothers. I really want to say, congratulations to you guys for A, starting a podcast, but B, for bringing like a fresh take on things. I mean, anyone who listens to 1 or 2 episodes of the Brothers of the Serpent can see that you guys are passionate and super already, advanced with all this stuff. So, I mean, you've been delving into it for years or decades or however long you've been doing it.
Yes.
It really shows through when you're interviewing, and I really appreciate the questions that you were asking, because I'll tell you, I'm not going to hear somebody ask me about the Vajra on every, on every podcast. So it's like every person's different. Everyone's going to bring out something different, which is what I really love. But I really appreciate what you guys are doing. I think you've got a great podcast going, so keep it up. And it's really important.
Thank you so much. I think your work is very important as well, man. So I encourage everybody to go get the books, watch the YouTube videos, subscribe to him, and also, guys, show up at Contact at the Cabin. It's going to be amazing. We get awesome geology, amazing star myths, high desert. It's going to be.
I'm really looking forward to it, but I can't wait.
Can't wait to see you guys there, and maybe we'll talk before then. I bet you we will.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get you back on at least once before then.
All right, man. Talking offline and planning.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks
a lot, Russ and Carl.
And thanks for your service too.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Talk to you guys later.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
All right, that was freaking amazing.
Yeah.
Great interview with David Mathisen. We thank him so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it, and we look forward, like we were saying, to seeing him in Utah in April.
Yeah. All right, everybody. You can get a hold of us at brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. Visit the website, brothersoftheserpent.com. Check out Snakeskins, the glossary, the encyclopedia for all things explained.
Snakesplained.
Snakesplained.
That's right. And you can also comment on the shows there. You can also follow us on Twitter at Snake Bros with no vowels, SNKBRS.
Share the shows. Donate to our pyramid scheme.
That's right. I finally put the Patreon link on the website.
Oh, wow. You are a very productive guy.
Yeah. I finally sat down and took 30 seconds to put that link on there.
Man.
It was a lot of work, guys. So now when you look at the Snake Bros pyramid scheme on the upper right of the website, you'll see the donation button for PayPal also, and right below it is the Patreon link that takes you to our Patreon page.
Yeah.
Thanks so much to our to people who do support the show, and to our Patreon supporters, Laser Printer Jam, Robert. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Thank all of you.
Yeah. Also, give us reviews. Like we have said many times, you give us reviews on iTunes, and if you leave a comment in the review there, we will read it on the show. They are so great. We love them so much. Even if you don't like us, we'll even read the ones that are 1 star. Because,
Yeah.
Also, History Shift makes all of our YouTube videos, so you can follow us on YouTube, our YouTube channel, Brothers of the Serpent. You can find us there. He has put every show into video format, and the ones where we have pictures, they're in there. The ones where we actually have video, which is happening more often lately now. I can do this. So thanks to History Shift so much. You guys can follow him on Twitter at History Shift. He's also got a YouTube channel, History Shift. Also a blog. He's got a blog where he basically is keeping track of his expeditions to find glacial erratics and dolmens in Montana. So that's historyshift.com. Thanks to History Shift so much for making all the videos. So we really appreciate that.
And we also have a Facebook group.
That's right.
The Watcher's on there, so you guys can go complain to him about everything you don't like about the show.
That's right.
In the group.
Yeah, make sure the Watcher knows all of your complaints, people.
Don't send them to me. That's not how problems get solved.
That's right. Yeah, so join the Facebook group, Brothers of the Serpent Facebook group. I think George Howard's on there as well. So
yeah,
people are joining up. It's people are having interesting conversations there. So join that. Also, don't forget about Contact with the Cabin 2020, like we have talked about multiple times in this show. Bryce Canyon and Zion.
Darren and Graham.
With the Grimerica guys. We're going to be this. So it's basically being hosted by us and the Grimerica guys. Got a bunch of cabins down there. We're going to do some stargazing. Going to do some Wim Hof stuff. And we're just going to hang out and have a great time. Yeah. And probably explore a lot of geology.
Yeah. Brandon Powell and David Mathisen.
That's right.
And it's going to be great.
Yep.
So
thank you so much to all of you listeners. We really appreciate you guys following us and listening to the show. We love you guys so much.
Love ya.
We love ya. Always have. Always will. Good night, Adamu. Get back to work.